Chapter 473. This was the consensus of the several people present. Those who could become the lead disciple of one of the 5 uniques were not simple people. They knew very well what could really make a person stand in today's world. Therefore, Wang Lu never cared if people scolded him for having no moral integrity. Zhou Mumu also didn't care if people accused her of being pedantic, and Zhang Zai turned a deaf ear to the curse that he would be single for a lifetime. This was the privilege of being a genius cultivator and the lead disciple. However, now Qianghua showed that she was a person who did not care about trifles, which made people shudder. The meaning hidden behind the smile was actually obvious. The Kill Immortal Sword housed hundreds of millions of demon world creatures. Therefore, Qianghua had a way to come to the demon world from 9 regions. At the same time, she certainly would not forget to prepare to go back. In other words, the Kill Immortal Sword also housed the creatures of 9 regions. Of course, with Qianghua's temperament and means, she would not kill innocent people. Most of the people who were housed in the sword were evil people. Since her debut, Qianghua had taken the task of killing demons and demons as her duty, and the number of souls that were killed by her sword was already countless. In terms of the number of people killed, except for Xiang Liang, the other 3 lead disciples combined might not even be as many as Qianghua. It was easy to accumulate some souls that could be used to lead the way. However, Wang Lu did not like the indifference shown by Qianghua at this time, because behind this indifference was Qianghua's incomparably arrogant attitude, which was a contempt for life. This lead disciple fairy seemed to regard herself as a high and mighty ruler. Her mission was to look as far as possible, and the so-called mortals were just a negligible number in her view. And for this kind of idea, Wang Lu was really disgusted, because he never liked others to plagiarize his ideas. However, at this point, whether he liked it or disliked it, Qianghua's Kill Immortal Sword undoubtedly pointed the way home for the 5 lead disciples. The next question was, should they gamble on this? I think everyone should have no objection to this, right? Wang Lu asked while turning his head to look at the other 4 people. Of course, it was unanimously approved. The next step is to determine the time. I think the next black tide will be a good time. Time is of the essence. Qianghua was the first to support him. I agree, in this new demon world, the longer we stay here, the stronger the binding force will be. After all, our cultivations are still lacking. If we stay here for too long in the King Pill realm, we will inevitably be assimilated. Zhou Mumu spread her hands. Since you've said so, I have no objections. Xiang Liang said concisely, I agree. Zhang Zai was a little reluctant to leave. I really can't bear to leave so soon. There are too many secrets waiting for me to explore. But academic researchers don't act pretentiously. Maybe next time. After the time was set, the 5 of them felt relieved. The biggest problem had been solved. It was a rare time to rest and recuperate before the arrival of the next black tide. During this period of time, he had to adjust himself to his best condition. Hey, the game is about to start. Just when they were ready to seize the time to meditate, Wang Lu suddenly pointed to the center of the field. At this time, the last performing team was quickly walking off the stage. The first match of the league tournament was about to begin. I'm really looking forward to it, Wang Lu said, obviously showing an eager expression. Zhou Mumu curled her lips and said, Hey, aren't you too playful? Qianghua knew Wang Lu better. She smiled and said, Is junior brother Wang Lu planning to seriously observe and learn, and then popularize it when we return to 9 regions? Wang Lu nodded his head. He had to admit that if not for the fact that his position was too different from Qianghua's, the 2 of them were actually quite close friends. Although the essence of this new demon world is just a dream, it is a dream built by hundreds of millions of demons for 2,000 years. In terms of social form, the new demon world is more mature than the 9 regions. Many things here can be regarded as advanced experience. Especially the entertainment of the new demon world, which is the crystallization of quite fierce market competition. After returning to 9 regions, as long as some transformation is done according to the local conditions, it will promote a revolution in the entertainment industry. Zhou Mumu looked at Wang Lu somewhat incomprehensibly. It was difficult to understand his theory, and also difficult to understand why he had the leisure to pay attention to the entertainment industry revolution. Not only the lightning ball, in the last few days, I will try my best to learn all the advanced experience of the new demon world. Then, when I return to 9 regions, I will finance a new firm from the mysterious Sky Mansion in the name of Wisdom Sect, and then try my best to imitate it. I've even designed the company's mascot.
Look.
Isn't that a penguin? It's a penguin. Isn't it cute? By imitating the advanced, coupled with my big penguin as the symbol, this firm will certainly have a promising future and grow into a large-scale empire. Regarding Wang Lu's beautiful imagination, Zhou Mumu just chuckled. At the same time, she secretly admired this guy's mentality, which was simply unmatched. In any case, in a few days, they would have to risk their lives. She really couldn't figure out why this guy wasn't nervous at all. The next match of the Lightning Ball League could be said to be extremely wonderful, which was an eye-opener. The members of the participating team were impressively all demon generals, with the strength of a Taoist master of King Pill in 9 regions. This was also the highest level of confrontation in the multi-level league of the Lightning Ball League. In order to better reflect the confrontation and viewing value, the Lightning Ball League had a strict level definition. Demons with different cultivation level would not be assigned to the same level of competition. In the multi-level league, the demon general level was the highest. It was not that there was no competition with higher strength, but it was just a small exchange between each other, not a public entertainment. And the demon general level competition was also the most exciting. It could be imagined that a group of Taoist masters of King Pill would fiercely fight in the water ball, which was comparable to the Tiani True Water. Each of them would use their wonderful skills to compete for the water ball and strive to send the water ball to the opponent's goal. The first match of the league went on for a full hour. The longer it went on, the stronger the appeal on the field. In the final stage of the game, even Zhou Mumu, who was not interested in the game, could not help but cheer for the players in the field. In the end, the home team of Xanarkand defeated their most powerful competitor, the Lucca City Star team, with a score of 7-4, which won the applause of the audience and raised the Eternal Shield high. Of course, this was only a special reward for the first victory. The real Eternal Shield would not be given to the winner until the end of the league. After the game, Wang Lu and the others left the field with the crowd. When they returned to their temporary residence, the celebratory atmosphere cooled down a bit. Among them, Zhou Mumu's feelings were the most complicated. If we don't have a clear goal, I think it won't take long for us to get lost here. Wang Lu also sighed. It's indeed a beautiful world that people can't bear to destroy. When it came to this topic, the atmosphere suddenly cooled down. According to the plan, when the black tide came, Qianghua would cut the way with the Kill Immortal sword. And after leaving the new demon world, they still had an important thing to do. Wake up the hundreds of millions of sleepers and end the 2,000 years of dream. This was mainly to prevent the spread and outbreak of the black tide. If left unchecked, the black tide would one day engulf everything and bring disaster to 9 regions that was no less than the Great War of Immortals and Demons. However, when the dream resuscitation came, this magnificent civilization that had been developed for 2,000 years would also disappear. Wang Lu planned to set up a business in 9 regions to imitate the entertainment activities of the new demon world. How could he not feel sorry for the scene of destruction and try to leave something behind? In the silence, Qianghua said, "Well, let's go back and rest first and adjust our immortal heart. After a game, I think everyone's mentality is a bit unstable." This time, even Wang Lu did not object. The next black tide would come after a long time. The essence of the black tide was the revival of the killing instinct of the demon race that had been suppressed in the new demon world. However, in the past few days, the Lightning Ball League was a good way to vent the negative feelings accumulated in the new demon world and delayed the time of the next black tide. However, the black tide finally came. The method of using the lightning ball to vent the negative emotions of the demon race was, after all, a temporary solution. In the evening, a mournful horn sounded in the sky, which was a warning issued by the Demon King for his people. When the horn sounded, the demons of the new demon world hid in their homes, and the noisy world suddenly became quiet. At the same time, Wang Lu and the others did the opposite. They walked out of the small courtyard and went all the way out of the city. The guards who usually guarded the city gate had already hidden in the barracks to rest. The huge city gate was actually unguarded, allowing people to come and go. The group of people walked all the way to the wilderness. At this time, the sky was as dark as ink. The starry light that once shone in the night was completely hidden, and the air was filled with a fishy smell, which made people feel depressed. Qianghua took the lead. Her Kill Immortal sword emitted a bloody light in the darkness, which dispelled the depression in everyone's heart. When the black tide came, Qianghua would use the Kill Immortal sword to cut open the space and open a safe passage directly to 9 regions. For this sword strike, Qianghua had previously sacrificed her sword for 3 days and 3 nights, even burning her own innate vitality. The resonance with the Kill Immortal Sword had reached its peak at this stage. Just as everyone stood still and prepared to welcome the arrival of the black tide, the sky collapsed. Being wrapped in darkness, this was the most intuitive feeling of the several people. Although it was dark all around and they could not see any change, it was as if there was a world falling rapidly on top of their heads. In the blink of an eye, these several Taoist masters of King Pill would be crushed into powder. However, in this blink of an eye, Qionghua's Kill Immortal Sword had already slashed out. The sword light moved forward and went straight to the sky. The sword light bloomed, and the tens of millions of souls wailed in unison. This was the result of Qionghua's illustrious battle of slaying demons and devils. These souls were all extremely vicious and evil when they were alive. After they died, they turned into fierce ghosts in the Kill Immortal Sword. Their fierceness was also particularly fierce. As the sword light shone, the tens of millions of souls actually found a point in the void. Go! Qianghua coldly shouted, and the power of the Kill Immortal Sword further broke out. The sea of blood that she learned from the battle for the 5 blood spirits crown once again surged out, forcing back the black tide. The other 4 people didn't say anything and immediately walked into the void along with the sword light. Qianghua herself was responsible for bringing up the rear. When Xiang Liang walked into the void, she turned the sword light and the surging sea of blood was taken back into the sword. The black tide, which was stimulated by the sea of blood, rushed over even more violently. However, Qianghua had already closed the space gap at the same time when the sea of blood converged, leaving only a confident back view in the new demon world. Turning around, Qianghua saw a group of people in the gap between worlds. If there were no coordinates here, even a cultivator with great magical ability would fall. However, there was a line under Qianghua's feet, and the other end was in a distant place, which was the direction of 9 regions. Qianghua smiled slightly. Okay, then we just need to, where's Wang Lu? When she took a closer look, Qianghua found that everyone else was there, only Wang Lu was missing. Chapter 474. Where's Wang Lu? As soon as she noticed that Wang Lu had disappeared, Qianghua felt her heart tightened and quickly asked the others, especially Zhou Mumu. Zhou Mumu, who had the best friendship with Wang Lu, opened her mouth, but she seemed somewhat confused. He disappeared in the blink of an eye. Disappeared. He was the first to enter the void, and I was right behind him. However, when I stepped into the void, I could only see half of his body. The other half was hidden in the void, and it looked like he had been split into 2. Then he said to me. When Zhou Mumu said this, she subconsciously swallowed and then said, he said that he forgot something and wanted to go back and get it. None of the 4 people present could say anything. He forgot something and wanted to go back and get it. Could it be that he forgot his brain? Did he know how much Qianghua had paid to find a gap in the new demon world that was known to be forever unbreakable and cut open this path? In order to open this path, Qianghua herself took the risk of being bitten by the Kill Immortal Sword, and the others also exposed themselves to the pressure of the black tide. He almost risked his life to finally seize the opportunity to break through. After escaping from the cage of the new demon world with great difficulty, he actually turned back? After a long time, Qianghua said, Wang Lu habitually does things unexpectedly, but every time he has his own considerations. He will not walk on the road to death. I think this time, he should have something that he doesn't want us to know. Zhou Mumu asked, with his thick skin, even if he runs naked in front of us, I'm afraid he won't change his expression. What is it that he needs to hide from all of us? Qianghua did not answer, but lightly said, this place is full of void turbulence, so it's not good to stay here for a long time. Moreover, my guiding clue can't last too long, so let's go back to 9 regions first and discuss the other things later. Hey, do you want to leave Wang Lu here? Qianghua asked, are you willing to stay with him? Zhou Mumu was tongue-tied. Even though her relationship with Wang Lu was good, it was far from the point where they were sworn brothers of life and death. Furthermore, as the lead disciple of Kuan Luin, she could not be so impulsive. But at least he's our teammate. Let's wait for a while, Qianghua said again. Do you think his problem can be solved in a short time? If not, what's the point of us waiting here for a while? Zhou Mumu was speechless. The only voice of opposition disappeared, and the itinerary of the 4 people was set. With Qianghua leading the way with the Kill Immortal Sword, they returned to 9 regions from the turbulent void. The entire journey was silent. The cultivation of the king pill cultivator was still far from being able to freely travel through the boundless universe. Xueqi also had to rely on a number of immortal sect's supreme treasures to firmly grasp the kill immortal sword. The other three followed closely behind, but they also had no time to pay attention to anything else. No one mentioned anything about Wang Lu again. Xueqi, who was walking at the front, sighed silently in her heart. Unlike the others, she more or less guessed the intention of Wang Lu's trip. For him, it would be an extremely difficult choice, but she believed that Wang Lu would be able to complete it well. Although the relationship between the two was not good, Xueqi would never underestimate Wang Lu. He was a teammate who never let people down. On the other side, after separating from the main team, Wang Lu did have a task that he had to complete alone. The familiar land, the familiar air. Setting foot on a bloody plain, Wang Lu could not help but sigh with emotion. Just half a month ago, he broke through the void from 9 regions and came here. He thought that he would see a world with a very different civilization, but as powerful as 9 regions. Unexpectedly, all he could see was a wasteland. Demon World. Wang Lu returned to the Demon World. Xueqi cut through the space with the Kill Immortal Sword and opened a path to 9 regions. However, Wang Lu was not in a hurry to return to 9 regions. Instead, he returned to the Demon World from the void. Of course, when he entered the Demon World, he was once again imprisoned and bound by the special structure of the new Demon World. At this time, breathing the familiar air and stepping on the familiar land, Wang Lu could clearly feel that his connection with 9 regions was once again cut off, and all kinds of props, including Spirit Sword Heavenly Talisman, had lost their effect. But it didn't matter. This time, he was ready to revisit his hometown. The sky was still filled with rolling blood clouds. It stood to reason that when he followed Xueqi to break through the encirclement, the black tide came. However, the black tide was only everywhere in the new Demon World and could not completely cover the Demon World. At least in a certain place, it was a forbidden area that the black tide would never approach. From the new Demon World to the void, and from the void to the Demon World, Wang Lu only took 2 steps, but these 2 steps condensed the essence of his cultivation base as Taoist Master King Pill. Each step contained endless calculation and the use of a considerable number of magical treasures. Otherwise, how could he have arrived at this place from the void in a single step? Wang Lu looked up and saw a mountain in front of him. A mountain piled up by the corpses of thousands of creatures. It was also the main body of the new Demon World. Next, Wang Lu whispered to himself and stepped forward. At the same time, he put his right hand into his bosom and clenched the already hot demon jade. Next, it was time to make a choice. He went through a lot of trouble and took a huge risk to come here, just for this thing, to awaken the demon race's millennium dream. As long as the demon race's dream was not awakened, the black tide in the dream would continue to brew and expand, and eventually become a disaster that could endanger the 9 regions. However, if he wanted to resuscitate the dream, it meant the destruction of the new Demon World. Although it was just a dream, it was the most magnificent dream that Wang Lu had ever seen. If he really wanted to destroy it, Wang Lu couldn't bear it. Because it was not a simple dream. After 2,000 years of development, the new Demon World had become an independent existence. Everyone in it was a living creature of flesh and blood. Moreover, they were peace-loving, hard-working, and intelligent. In the new Demon World, even Xueqi, who was slightly extreme in the face of the division between immortal and demon, could not help but put down her killing intent and could not make a move against the residents. It was really an intoxicating place. But now, he had to awaken the dream and make the hundreds of millions of creatures in the new Demon World die without a burial place in the collapse of the space. Wang Lu did not want to bear this sin, but now it seemed that he had no choice. Even if he didn't do it himself, after a few years or decades, the new Demon World would still collapse. Understanding this, Wang Lu immediately suppressed the uneasiness in his heart and continued to move forward. The way to awaken the dream was very simple. As long as he made full use of the ruling effect of the demon jade, it would be enough. Although after the destruction of the Eternal Tree, the demon jade had lost its effect of ruling the world, Wang Lu believed that for the mountain of corpses in front of him, the demon jade still had some effect. And what he had to do was to order these creatures to wake up. Wang Lu was not sure whether the demon in the black fog in the group of immortal tombs gave him the demon jade for this reason, but now it seemed that it could come in handy. However, just as Wang Lu was about to stimulate the power of the demon jade, an unusually loud voice suddenly sounded under him. I seem to smell a familiar smell. Upon hearing this, Wang Lu was stunned and then looked at his feet, because the sound came from his feet. Enissi, you actually woke up? The howling demon Enissi that he found in the library of Kunlun Immortal Mountain was the trump card that Wang Lu prepared to return to 9 regions from the demon world. However, the situation changed too fast. First, the situation in the demon world was beyond expectation. Later, Wang Lu found out that after entering the demon world, Enissi was in a coma, as if it was in suspended animation, and completely lost its function. This was normal. Enissi was an ancient remnant that lived tens of thousands of years ago. In the current demon world, the laws had collapsed and the atmosphere was in disorder, which was no longer suitable for survival. Especially since the air here seemed to be highly toxic to the demon race, Enissi, who only had a mouth left, naturally could not hold on. He thought that this mouth would be in a coma all the way back to 9 regions, or even not wake up. Unexpectedly, it woke up at this time. However, even if it woke up, it would be useless. When Wang Lu was about to ignore Enissi, he heard Enissi exclaim again, "Yes, I do smell the breath of my fellow demon. Master, have we returned to the demon world?" "Yes, this is the smell of the demon world. Although there has been a great change, I will never mistake the smell of my hometown." Feeling the surging under his feet, Wang Lu lifted his foot, and Enissi immediately fluttered in the air like a withered leaf in the wind, cheering. "Ha ha ha, I'm home. I'm finally home." Wang Lu sighed inwardly. Home is indeed home, but with the vicissitudes of life, your hometown has been reduced to ruins. Sure enough, it didn't take long for Enissi's cheers to subside and be replaced by deep doubts. "Master, why do I feel that my hometown seems to have changed a lot, and it's lifeless?" Enissi, who had lost almost all of its physical organs in the battle of immortals and demons, naturally could not see and perceive the earth-shaking changes in the demon world. However, after the ecstasy subsided, it finally noticed the abnormality from its only perception. Wang Lu went straight to the point. "The demon world is finished." "Finished?" Enissi was stunned. After a long time, it asked, "Master, you said it's finished. What do you mean?" Wang Lu said faintly, "The eternal tree was destroyed, the laws of heaven and earth of the demon world collapsed, and everyone died." "This is impossible!" Enissi exclaimed. "I just smelled the smell of my fellow demon." "Smell again? Didn't you smell the smell of corpses?" Enissi's voice once again became low. Being in front of the mountain of corpses, how could it not smell the strong and almost suffocating corpse smell? It was just that Enissi didn't want to think about this possibility at all. It only focused on the remaining trace of life in the corpse smell. Just when Wang Lu thought that Enissi had accepted its fate, the howling demon roared again. "This is impossible. I don't believe that the demon race will be extinct like this. Flash demon, stand up. I order you to appear in front of me immediately, right now." In the demon world 10,000 years ago, the flash demon was regarded as the subordinate race of the howling demon. They would obey the call of the main race. However, in the current demon world, how could there be any flash demon that could respond to the call? "Flash demon, are you going to rebel?" "I'm back, it's me." Enissi roared with all its might. After a while, blood spilled out of its mouth, but it still refused to stop. Then, "Mist demon, where is the mist demon? Mist demon, come out. You can't be extinct like this. I know you are still alive, come out." Boom! Enissi's roar pierced through the sky, and the fire clouds in the sky were shaken away by the roar. The howling demon really lived up to its reputation. But no matter how loud the roar was, could it bring the dead back to life? Just as Wang Lu shook his head, he suddenly saw a bump on the mountain of corpses in front of him trembled slightly. A corpse that had been sleeping for 2,000 years suddenly stood up. Chapter 475. Wang Lu really felt that it was an eye-opener. It was not uncommon for the dead to come back to life, but it was rare for a corpse that had been dead for 2,000 years to be awakened by a roar. What's more, it was awakened by the roar, and it was a demon that should have been sleeping forever. This was simply resurrection from the dead. Enissi, as the magical ability of the Howling clan, was indeed not a trivial matter. However, Wang Lu was more interested in what happened next. On the corpse mountain, no one knew whether it was a coincidence or some other reason, but a corpse responded to Enissi's call and resuscitation from its sleep. Resuscitation of a single person did not have any effect on the new demon realm. The rest of the corpses were still in a long sleep. On the corpse mountain, this upright corpse seemed abnormally conspicuous. Hennessy noticed its resuscitation, and it immediately floated over and came to the front of the corpse. Sure enough, someone is still alive. You, quickly tell me what happened to the demon realm? At this time, Hennessy didn't even care about the existence of its master. And Wang Lu didn't mind. He just strolled to the corpse mountain and came to the side of the corpse. Under such circumstances, it was really incredible that someone could resurrect the dead. This corpse must be a great person when it was alive. However, it could be seen that this was only the final radiance of the setting sun, because after leaving the corpse mountain dream, this tall corpse was rotting at an alarming rate. However, before it completely rotted, it still had the ability to speak. Demon realm. The consciousness of the corpse that was just resuscitation was still a little fuzzy. After a while, it sighed faintly. The demon realm no longer exists. Hearing this, Hennessy finally gave up its fantasy, and its whole body became sluggish. Seeing that there was no other problem, the corpse that was awakened was ready to fall back to sleep. However, Hennessy suddenly asked, "Did we lose?" "Yes." The corpse replied calmly. "I see." Hennessy's voice was bitter. He only had his mouth left, and he didn't even have eyes. Naturally, there was no tearful scene, but the pain in his voice was empathizing. "Did we resist until the last moment? Even though we've lost, we're still glorious warriors, aren't we?" Hearing this question, the corpse hesitated for a moment before replying, "We didn't resist to the end because it was too unwise." Hennessy was stunned when he heard that. He couldn't believe what he had just heard. "You're saying, we didn't resist to the end? Because it's unwise? What do you mean by that?" The corpse briefly explained the cataclysm that happened 2,000 years ago, and then concluded, "In short, in the face of the crisis of the entire demon world, there is no point in showing off one's courage. So in the end, we created a dream together and built a new kingdom in the dream." Ridiculous. Ridiculous. This is utterly ridiculous. Hennessy angrily interrupted him. "What do you mean by the courage of an ordinary man is meaningless? What did he mean by resisting to the end was unwise? Such words are simply a disgrace to the fiend race. This is the consensus of all of us." However, the corpse was very calm. When there is a chance of victory, fighting bravely is worth advocating. But if you have no chance of winning at all, you should choose to give up wisely. Then hide in your dreams and be a coward for the rest of your life? What the hell are you? You are definitely not the fiend race, because I don't believe that my descendants will become such trash. In the past, even if we faced an opponent that was impossible to defeat, we still held our heads high until the last moment. Because that is the attitude that the fiend race should have. The corpse was somewhat puzzled. But that's not rational. Rational? That's a toy that humans are interested in. The fiend race never needs any rationality. What we need is honor and dignity. Hennessy kept roaring, and because of its hoarse voice, it kept spitting out blood from its mouth. But it didn't intend to stop at all. Who made the decision? Who dares to lead the fiend race into such a humiliating path? Let him come out to see me. The resurrected corpse was obviously a little embarrassed and stood motionless in the same place. Call your leader out to see me. While roaring, Hennessy began to spit out blood. Obviously, its power didn't allow it to be so violent, but it was also obvious that it didn't care about its own life and death. In the end, until Hennessy's strength was exhausted and it fell to the ground unwillingly, the corpse mountain's leader didn't appear. Even the corpse that was awakened by the roar turned into ashes under the collapse of the law, leaving no useful clues. Hennessy was lying on the ground, dying, but its mouth was still murmuring. I don't believe that this is the end. Hiding in the dream to continue the civilization? That's a joke. Master, tell me, this is not the end. Wang Lu sighed softly. Of course, this is not the end. Everything has just begun. Is that so? Then I'm relieved. We, the fiend race, should not be so cowardly. After saying that, the noisy howling race finally fell silent. And Wang Lu fell into a long silence. Previously, letting Hennessy out was purely a matter of convenience. He didn't think too much about it, but after Hennessy finished its roar, Wang Lu had a doubt in his mind. 2,000 years ago, Facing the crisis of life and death, the fiend race chose to hide in the dream. It was a good move, but now it seemed that there were indeed many things that couldn't be explained. Wang Lu didn't dare to say that he had a deep understanding of the fiend race, but from the records of the two great wars of immortals and demons, at least one thing was clear. The fiend race was a particularly unyielding creature. Even the relatively cunning and changeable races were no exception. So, in the face of the collapse of the demon realm, these creatures who would rather die than fight actually wisely chose not to fight? From a human's point of view, hiding in the dream was understandable, but Enesie's roar before its death made Wang Lu more aware that he couldn't measure the behavior of the fiend race by human standards. From the perspective of the fiend race, in the face of a desperate situation, the normal choice should be to fight to the end until death. As for turning over and hiding in the dream, it was really not in line with their aesthetics. Of course, among the hundreds of millions of fiend race creatures, it was inevitable that there would be a few exceptions. However, the towering mountain of corpses in front of him was obviously the path that the vast majority of the hundreds of millions of fiend race creatures chose. This was indeed a bit abnormal. After realizing the problem, Wang Lu fell into a deeper contradiction. As a professional adventurer, it was impossible for him to turn a blind eye to an important branch in front of him. However, at this time, he didn't want to complicate the issue, especially this branch, which was a bit too difficult for him at present. He had just been promoted to Taoist Master King Pill, so he couldn't bear the responsibility of finding the truth of the world. Wang Lu paced back and forth on the mountain of corpses. After hesitating for a long time, he still couldn't make a decision. This was really rare for Wang Lu, who had always been decisive. In Spirit Sword Mountain, he wouldn't even blink an eye if he took the initiative to report his master's evil deeds to the sect leader. But now, it was really difficult to make a choice. Originally, I just wanted to call for a bed. I didn't intend to go deep into it. Finally, Wang Lu looked up and sighed. Then, the sword of Mount Kuan drilled out of his palm and waved it twice in the air. Sword Qi crisscrossed and bombarded the mountain of corpses, but it only aroused layers of ripples. This mountain of corpses that had existed for 2,000 years had evolved into a very high-level magical treasure, which was impervious to all kinds of evil and invulnerable to all kinds of methods. With Wang Lu's current cultivation base, he could hardly shake it. Moreover, after the collapse of the Eternal Tree, the effect of the demon jade was also greatly reduced, and the only thing that could resonate with it was the howling race that died of exhaustion. Wang Lu really didn't want to take the risk. However, what was the old saying? Do you want to be a coward for a lifetime, or do you want to be a hero, even if it only lasts for a few seconds? Although Wang Lu didn't think that a person who could only last for a few seconds was qualified to be called a hero, but, in the face of such a big mystery, he could not suppress his desire to explore. With a strong curiosity, Wang Lu pointed the tip of the sword downward. The primal chaos heaven-splitting sword Qi condensed into a point, but it didn't shoot out. Instead, it continued to surge, making the sword Qi sharper. Then, Wang Lu gently inserted the tip of the sword into the gap between several corpses that were almost glued together. The long-awaited sword strike broke the gap between the corpses without any suspense. Then, the sword of Mount Kuan forcefully flicked it, and with the all-conquering sharpness of the heaven-splitting sword Qi, it opened a gap in the mountain of corpses. At the same time, an earth-shattering shock force came from the mountain of corpses. Wang Lu hastily took out the demon jade and put it in front of him. This once supreme treasure of the demon realm still played some role, offsetting the shock force of the mountain of corpses. And Wang Lu took this opportunity to go deeper and completely drilled into the mountain of corpses. He wanted to find a person in the mountain of corpses, a guide who had led hundreds of millions of demons on the wrong path, the great demon king who had ruled the demon realm for 2,000 years. After the conversation between Enesy and the demon's soul, Wang Lu already had too many riddles waiting to be solved. And the corpse of the demon king from 2,000 years ago was the first step for Wang Lu to solve the riddle. Just now, while walking, he had already detected the location of the demon king's corpse. Right in the center of the mountain of corpses, surrounded by hundreds of millions of demons, like stars surrounding the moon. That was the burial place of the demon king. This mountain of corpses was like a mausoleum made of corpses. Among the hundreds of millions of demons, only the demon king had a burial place. This was also a doubtful point. Moving forward in the mountain of corpses was difficult. Even with the protection of the demon jade, Wang Lu still had to face all kinds of visions. After all, this was the demon king's mausoleum that was far more terrifying than any tomb in the world. Hundreds of millions of creatures were buried together with him. Merely the resentment and hatred of those buried together could form a raging black tide in the demon realm. In 9 regions, there was often a legend about the ghost blowing out the lamp among tomb robbers. Wang Lu laughed at himself as he walked. If there were ghosts in this mountain of corpses, it would not just be the wandering ghosts, but the ghost tide? Would that be the ghost's lamp? Fortunately, that scene that was not suitable for children did not happen. Under the protection of the demon jade, Wang Lu, relying on his non-phase sword defense, opened a path. He finally saw the coffin of the Demon King. The Demon King was indeed worthy of being called the Demon King. The treatment he received was far different from the others. At the core of the mountain of corpses, the Demon King had an independent room. Thousands of tall and burly demons carried him on their backs. Their backs formed the flat floor, walls, and roof. On the 4 walls, poems and essays were engraved to the Demon King. Based on his understanding of the demon race's characters, Wang Lu could see that the last Demon King of the demon race had established a good achievement in just a few decades. Therefore, he also enjoyed a very high prestige in the demon world. Even his words carried enormous weight, which was why he could make hundreds of millions of demons follow him. At the same time, there was also a portrait of the Demon King on one of the walls. He could vaguely see that it was Lan's kindred. He had a red face and fangs, and a long tail swayed behind him. It was just that, compared to Lan, this Demon King was thin and small. Only his pair of hourglass-like pupils showed that he was different. Looking at this portrait, Wang Lu was a bit lost in thought. But soon, he shook his head and no longer paid attention to it. The inside of this mountain of corpses was not a place to stay for a long time, and there was no need to look at the remains of the dead. The key problem was. Wang Lu took a few steps forward, reached out his hand, grabbed the cover of the Demon King's coffin, and then forcefully opened it. Inside it was empty. Chapter 476. Facing the empty coffin, Wang Lu was silent for a long time and sighed helplessly. Sure enough, it's a lie. Before entering the mountain of corpses, Wang Lu began to doubt the identity of the last Demon King. No matter how many amazing achievements he had made during his reign, there were 2 undeniable problems. First, the eternal tree of the demon realm collapsed during his tenure. Second, in the face of desperation, he led hundreds of millions of demons to make a choice that went against common sense. No matter how many eulogies there were for such a leader, it was worth questioning. After all, this kind of thing was not uncommon for Wang Lu. In Wang Lu's experience, he had seen too many similar situations. On the one hand, he fooled the people into dedicating everything for the great goal, but on the other hand, he quietly prepared a way out. Among the so-called leaders, such goods could be said to emerge endlessly. The demon world was vast, so it was not unusual for it to occasionally produce one. It was a pity that according to the portrait, this leader was handsome even by human standards. He did not have a head, which was more in line with his own impression. As for why he coincidentally met such a person among the last demon kings, it was very simple. Because once such a person appeared on the throne of the demon realm, he was basically destined to be the last demon king. However, looking at the empty coffin, Wang Lu was still a little uneasy. What happened 2,000 years ago? Is it really that simple? Because the Demon King did not rule well, the eternal tree was destroyed, and the demons were led astray and fell into a long dream. Is that it? Unfortunately, no matter how many questions there were now, there was no way to verify it. The coffin was empty, and there were no valuable clues left. As for the eulogies on the surrounding walls, there was basically no reading value. A leader who could lead the most valiant and warlike race to their dreams naturally wouldn't leave any black marks in the history books for himself. Leaving a name in the history book was a common problem of that kind of person. So next, are you going to wake up? The mystery that he wanted to solve the most could not be solved, so Wang Lu could only settle for the next best thing and began to perform the secondary task: awaken the Millennium Dream and solve the problem of the Black Tide. In the opening ceremony of the new Demon World Lightning Ball League, Wang Lu had already begun to prepare for this. Now it was almost imperative to carry it out. But Wang Lu couldn't make up his mind to do it immediately. What he had seen and heard in the new demon world for half a month was unforgettable to him. The dreamland built by the demon race for 2,000 years was simply a miracle. If that magnificent and brilliant civilization was destroyed like this, Wang Lu would really feel sad. He actually quite liked watching lightning balls. Moreover, although the essence of the new demon world was just a dream, no one could deny that this dream contained great power. For Wang Lu and the others, it was no different from being in the real world. The delicacies he enjoyed in his dream were real. His mustard seed bag still contained a few bowls of the special snacks of the new devil realm. They had already materialized. Similarly, the tens of thousands of powerful people in the new demon world were not just an illusion. Overall, they were powerful enough to keep pace with the current 9 regions. If they were all lost because of the dreamland resuscitation, it would be too much of a pity. Just by waking up 2 demon kings, a number of demon lords, and countless demon generals in the new demon world, Wang Lu felt that this was not something worth boasting about. What's more, the prop that he used to wake up was the demon jade in his hand, the essence of the 5 blood spirit crown, which was given to him by the black fog demon in the group of immortal tombs. Could it be that the reason why he gave the demon jade to him was because he hoped that he would smash the new demon world and completely bury the last remaining fire of civilization in the demon world? There should be a more appropriate solution to this matter. However, if he let go of the new demon world because of a moment of kindness, then when the expansion of the black tide was finally uncontrollable, the new demon world would also be destroyed, and at the same time, even the 9 regions would be affected. At that time, his kindness would be a shame that could not be washed away in his life. I say, last Demon King, if you were to make the decision on this matter, what would you do? In the Demon King's tomb, Wang Lu softly asked. At the same time, his eyes were locked on the mural on the wall. If it were you, you would not hesitate to activate the Demon Jade. Because this is rational enough and safe enough. Although this choice is cruel, it is a choice that has no other choice. As Wang Lu spoke, his voice became softer and softer, and at the same time, his eyes became brighter and brighter. If it were you, you would definitely say that. In any case, you can always find an excuse that there is no other choice. And I believe that there are many people in this world who agree with this kind of value. Even Qianghua is no exception. Unfortunately, the person who came here is me, and how could I conspire with people like you? When there is a dilemma, then find a new way, such as now. As Wang Lu said that, he walked to the wall and pressed his palm on a piece of writing. Then, he inwardly marveled that the martyrs finally left something useful. Now, I can choose to wish them a sweet dream. After walking out of the mountain of corpses, facing the blood cloud of the demon world, Wang Lu took a long breath. The choice made in the tomb was not easy. Choosing to destroy everything was the simplest, but it was also the most disdainful thing for Wang Lu. Therefore, he chose a more difficult path. Wang Lu could not allow the black tide in the new demon world to continue to expand and eventually become a natural disaster that threatened the 9 regions. Therefore, his next job was to find a way to eliminate this black tide. That was easier said than done. The new demon world was full of geniuses. For 2,000 years, no one could eliminate the black tide. On the contrary, because of the expansion of the new demon world, the power of the black tide continued to grow. Wang Lu alone, in the face of the power of the whole world, was simply not worth mentioning. Even with the help of the demon jade, Wang Lu could not directly fight against the black tide. Even if the eternal tree was still there, and the demon jade still had the magical effect of controlling all things in the demon world, it was impossible to eliminate the evil thoughts in the hearts of the hundreds of millions of creatures in the demon world with just one jade. If the demon jade was so easy to use, the demon race would have already exterminated the human race during the first great war of immortals and demons. However, this was not an unsolvable problem. In the process of slowly walking out of the mountain of corpses in the tomb, Wang Lu had already built a general framework of the plan. In his view, things were still promising. The cause of the black tide was the collection of negative emotions that accumulated unconsciously after the creatures of the new demon world were forcibly harmonized. For 2,000 years, the people of the new demon world had never discovered that the world they lived in had castrated many things in their nature. Without realizing this, naturally, there was no way to solve the problem of the black tide. This was the case of the onlooker being blinded. Otherwise, with the current civilization accumulation of the new demon world, with its many strong people, could it really not solve the problem of the black tide? The biggest problem was that they were not aware of the existence of the problem. According to this line of reasoning, it seemed that it would be very easy for Wang Lu to solve the problem. As long as the residents of the new demon world were aware of the problem, it seemed that the problem would be easily solved. But after a little thought, he knew that it was a dead end. If the residents of the new demon world suddenly learned that they lived in a world that suppressed their instincts, then it was easy for them to think that the essence of this world might be a dream. Then they would suddenly wake up and the dream would shatter. Since Wang Lu did not want to wake them up, he could not use such a straightforward way. So he planned to do it more carefully and transform the setting of the new demon world from the perspective of outsiders. The emergence of the black tide, from another perspective, could also be understood as a problem of the survival of a country without external aggression. The demon race was a group of natural masochists. If they were not burned black and blue by the flames of war, their thoughts would not be clear. The environment of the new demon world was too peaceful, so it was not suitable for survival at all. In that case, he would create a little turbulence in the new demon world and let them enjoy themselves. Of course, with Wang Lu's current cultivation, it was still impossible for him to directly interfere with the dream, especially a world that was very close to the real world. It was really difficult for Wang Lu to intervene. But he had the demon jade. Thinking of this, Wang Lu only felt that the demon jade in his hand released an unprecedented amazing heat, as if it was also responding to him, pointing out the correct path. Very good. Next, let us be the saviors of the world together. Then, he held the demon jade in his left hand and spread out a scroll in his right hand. The scroll was drawn by Lu Li, the sixth elder of the Heavenly Sword Hall. It could copy most of the talismans, manuals, and pictures in an instant, and even the effects of them could be inherited. Wang Lu used this scroll to make a copy of a painting in the Demon King's mausoleum and reproduced it in front of him. That painting depicted the legendary secret technique used by the Demon King 2,000 years ago, the dream-building technique. Due to the time limit, it was impossible for Wang Lu to master the secret method inherited from the royal family of the demon world in a short period of time. However, he also didn't need to master it. It was enough for him to know how to influence the new demon world, this behemoth. And this part of the content was recorded in great detail on the murals. The demon race 2,000 years ago had a very high degree of trust in the Demon King at that time. The new demon world they built operated independently and was not affected by external forces. But the Demon King was given special treatment, giving him the highest management authority. As long as he operated according to the method recorded on the murals, he could directly influence the fundamental laws of the new demon world. In simple terms, as long as the Demon King thought about it, he could double the gravity of the new demon world, and could dry up the spiritual energy of the new demon world. And these drastic changes that changed the world were actually operated by hundreds of millions of sleepers. The Demon King himself did not even need to do anything. Wang Lu was not the Demon King 2,000 years ago, but with the demon jade in his hand, he could make a temporary cameo. Of course, it was impossible for Wang Lu to manipulate all the laws of the new demon world as freely and meticulously as the Demon King himself. However, he only needed a slight adjustment. He wanted to release a spell throughout the new demon world. A spell that made people unable to fall into a deep sleep to escape from reality. And the time to cast the spell was when the wind of destruction came. He wanted the residents of the new demon world to face the black tide. Chapter 477. In the past 2,000 years, the demons of the new world of devils had never really faced their dark side. Every time the black tide came, they would hide in the city and sleep like ostriches. Occasionally, there would be challengers, but they would also be destroyed by the resentment of hundreds of millions of creatures. However, now Wang Lu intended to reverse the situation in one fell swoop. He wanted the demons of the new demon world to wake up from their slumber and face the black tide head-on, so that they could witness with their own eyes what kind of terrifying beast was bred in their heart. Then, the demons of the new world of devils would personally destroy the ghosts in the black tide. For 2,000 years, there was neither internal nor external trouble in the new demon world. Now, Wang Lu wanted to give them a big external trouble, which just so happened to give this group of idle demon race people who could only vent their wild nature through the lightning ball. And as they gradually invested more energy in fighting against the ghosts of the black tide, the power of the black tide would naturally decrease. Under this situation, the seemingly unstoppable black tide might really be suppressed by the demons of the new world of devils. Of course, in the process, the new world of devils would suffer a terrible blow. The dream civilization that had lasted for 2,000 years would also fall from the clouds and become more real, but this was the best result. Was it better than being swallowed by the black tide unknowingly? Was it better than being suddenly awakened by the demon jade and the collapse of all civilizations in an instant? This was the best of both worlds plan that Wang Lu came up with. Originally, he only had a rough idea in his mind, but he faced many difficulties when he actually put it into practice. But the dream-building technique that he found on the mausoleum murals was like a catalyst that made his prototype quickly mature. Wang Lu sat cross-legged on top of the mountain of corpses. In front of him was an open picture scroll. The densely packed text and graphics rapidly changed as his gaze shifted. However, no matter how much time passed, there would always be new content on the picture scroll. The text and pictures on the 1-foot square picture scroll seemed to be endless. The dream-building technique was a broad and profound knowledge. In Wang Lu's eyes, it was almost no less than the treasure of the Lingjian school, the Star Sword Book. With Wang Lu's level of comprehension, it was impossible for him to learn anything in a short period of time. However, he didn't need to learn that much. As his gaze swept up and down, the contents of the scroll changed rapidly before finally stopping at a certain section. Wang Lu sighed softly. This was the place. If translated literally, it was the king's edict, and according to Wang Lu's understanding, it was the administrator's manual. The relevant chapters were all about how an administrator should give orders to the new realm of devils, and then let this huge machine run on its own and deploy power to achieve the desired effect. The administrator's instructions were so complicated that they could almost form a separate language. However, Wang Lu only focused on the main points and quickly grasped the content he wanted. After that, there was no time to practice. It was time to put it into practice. Wang Lu pressed his hands on the surface of the mountain of corpses, and his primordial spirit slowly sank along the joints of his body. When he touched the mountain of corpses, he felt a tremendous force that almost made his soul scatter. Wang Lu immediately said the administrator's password, and the invincible force turned into a spring breeze, gently wrapping Wang Lu's primordial spirit. With his divine sense, Wang Lu found that he had come to the new realm of devils again, but this time it was from the perspective of God. He was above the clouds, and the whole new realm of devils could be seen. At the same time, countless vague figures and numbers appeared in front of him, which were all kinds of data of the whole new realm of devils, including the total population of the new realm of devils, the population statistics according to the realm of strength, and many constant settings of the new realm of devils. Wang Lu couldn't even understand most of the content. According to Wang Lu's own expectation, it would take at least a month to understand this administrator's function. How could he waste a month here? So he decided to take a crude and simple approach, directly skipping all the relevant prelude parts of the instructions, starting from the actual operation, and then directly practicing according to the examples provided in the manual. To put it bluntly, the new realm of devils was not his home after all. So what if he broke it? Thinking so, Wang Lu calmed his mind and began to input the administrator's instructions step by step according to the example. The original version of the instructions was written in the demon language, and it was also the royal family's exclusive code language. Wang Lu was not familiar with this language, so he had to input it in the way he was familiar with first, and then translate it. As for the possible errors, he could only leave it to fate. As soon as the command was issued, Wang Lu only felt that there was a flash in front of him, as if there was a tremendous force that could not be resisted flowing around him, falling down, and covering the whole new realm of devils. And the residents of the new realm of devils who were affected by this energy all felt the top of their heads cool, as if they were enlightened, making them 100 times more energetic and full of energy. Many of the demons who had been tired for several days and were drowsy were instantly full of energy, as if they had been resurrected on the spot. And those demons who were sound asleep on the bed jumped up directly, looking around in disbelief, wondering if they were confused from sleep. Of course, there were also many side effects. Some demons were meditating in seclusion, in a state where they seemed to be asleep, but not really asleep. When the auspicious signs suddenly fell from the sky, their breathing suddenly became erratic, and they were in unbearable pain. There were even some who were seriously injured and vomited blood because of this. The relevant detailed statistical report immediately appeared in front of Wang Lu. Looking at the huge number of casualties, even Wang Lu could not help but sweat a little. God mode was not fun. This kind of crude and one-size-fits-all command, even a simple awakening spell, would cause drastic changes in the world, causing heavy casualties. As for the follow-up effects of the incident, it was even more far-reaching and lasting. After the spell was launched, the strong people of the new realm of devils reacted immediately. The two Demon King sisters looked up at the sky at the same time, their sharp eyes almost meeting Wang Lu's. Wang Lu immediately stopped. If he continued to play, he was afraid that people would soon find out the abnormality, and then wake up to the nature of the new realm of devils. At that time, if the dream resuscitation, his entire plan would be in vain. And because the method of casting the spell was too rough, the entire structure of the world became unstable. A large number of error interface appeared on the control panel, and eye-catching red crosses almost filled the vision. But this experiment also proved that the command was effective. Next time, as long as the same command was entered when the black tide came, all the problems should be solved. Should be able to. The next black tide came very quickly. Perhaps because of the previous awakening experiment, it brought heavy psychological pressure to the demons of the new realm of devils. So just half a day later, in the evening, the horn of the Demon King sounded in the sky. The black tide was coming. At the same time, Wang Lu, who was in God mode, also received a large number of warning messages. If translated in a free translation, it would be, "The dream system is processing an important process, do not turn off the system." Soon, the sky darkened, and darkness covered the sky. The demons hid under the protection of the city according to the rules that had been passed down for 2,000 years. Most of them chose to rest, and a few planned to work overtime in their rooms. But when the black tide came, everyone would actually be forced to fall into a deep sleep and cease to exist. This state of disappearance was not the same as ordinary sleep, so it was not certain whether Wang Lu's awakening spell would work perfectly. But at present, this was the only command he could use to cast the spell. Monster spell and wake up. The same command as half a day ago appeared in Wang Lu's mind. When the time came, the command would be activated and the spell would be used to wake up the whole realm. Then, the black tide finally came. The appearance of the black tide was very abrupt. A moment ago, Wang Lu was still reviewing the command code in his mind, and the next moment, the black tide silently enveloped the entire new demonic realm. At the same time, hundreds of millions of creatures in the new demonic realm began to fall into a deep sleep. Those who were already lying in bed with their eyes closed suddenly heard the sound of snoring. Those who did not sleep all night also fell asleep unknowingly. The next morning, they would resuscitation full of energy, and then completely forget that they had fallen asleep. And when the demons fell asleep, their bodies also began to fade, connected to the whole world, and hid when the black tide came. And at this moment, Wang Lu decisively issued a command. The red alert interface filled the field of vision in an instant, and it was stacking up at an alarming rate. The supreme place where Wang Lu was also shaking, and the mountains were shaking. The command to wake up at this critical moment of the arrival of the black tide was a root command that had never been issued in the 2,000 years of operation of the new demonic realm. And for Wang Lu, who issued the command, the world had begun to silently express its rejection. But Wang Lu did not care at all. Because no matter how much this dream rejected him, as long as he was still the orthodox lord of the demonic realm with the demonic jade in his hand, his command would be implemented. Those demons who had fallen asleep were forcibly awakened, and their figures appeared again from the void. And at this time, the black tide had officially arrived. Pale skeletons and rotten zombies had filled the entire world, and then, unexpectedly, the resuscitation of the demons. If it was a small number of demons' resuscitation, then it was nothing more than a few missing people in the huge new demonic realm. But when the hundreds of millions of demons in the new demonic realm all resuscitation, it meant the beginning of a war. What is this? In a small border city of the new demonic realm, the guards on the city wall were trembling as they looked at the vast army of skeletons outside the city, and then immediately struggled out of their fear and resolutely sounded the alarm. After a while, several demon generals flew to the top of the city wall. Some of them were even stained with blood. They had experienced a short but fierce battle on the way and killed their opponents. However, after seeing the undead outside the city, they realized that the battle they had experienced was not worth mentioning at all. Quickly send an urgent report to His Majesty the Demon King, say, "No need, I already know." Halfway through the demon general's words, an indifferent woman's voice interrupted. And hearing the woman's voice, all the demon generals knelt on one knee. "Greetings, Your Majesty the Demon King." The contemporary great demon king who ruled the new demonic realm actually came to this border city silently. However, several demon generals soon discovered that it was only a clone of the demon king who came here. All the cities in the new demonic realm are experiencing the same situation as you, the great demon king explained lightly. Several demon generals asked incredulously, "All the cities? Your Majesty the Demon King, what the hell is going on? Where the hell did these souls come from? What should we do?" For a time, There was a lot of noise. Although the demon generals were strong, after all, they had not experienced the baptism of war, so they quickly fell into panic. At this time, the Demon King's clone spoke again. "We don't need to care about what they are, where they come from, While speaking, the clone raised his right hand, and in the pitch-black steel glove, blazing flames were burning. At the same time, outside the city, where the army of skeletons was most concentrated, the ground within a radius of about 10 miles began to tremble like water waves, and a lone peak suddenly rose from the ground, like a long spear piercing through the huge army of the undead. At the top of the lone peak, lava burst out, and a blazing torrent of destruction flowed from the top of the mountain, sweeping away thousands of soldiers. The whole process took less than 10 minutes, and the army of skeletons that made the guards tremble was melted by the eruption of lava. Then, the Demon King's clone withdrew his right hand, which was almost in a state of incandescence, and said softly, "We just need to crush them." Chapter 478. Wang Lu did not see with his own eyes how the Supreme of the Demon Realm transformed into hundreds of incarnations, descended to the cities of the Demon Realm, and crushed the army of the dead with supreme power. Because before the great Demon King's incarnation arrived, he had already been ejected by the system. When the Black Tide arrived, he released a worldwide spell. Wang Lu only lasted for a moment in the Supreme Land before he was ejected by the system. He was ejected to protect himself because the moment Wang Lu left, the Supreme Land was crushed into pieces. The fall of the Supreme Land stunned Wang Lu for a moment, and then he laughed. The Supreme Land was actually the administrator's account, and because of Wang Lu's violent operation, the system was in chaos, and even the administrator's account was crushed. This meant that the new demon realm had entered an unprecedented state of chaos. No one could manipulate this dream at will, and the spells that had been forcibly added to make up for the peace had also been broken. The instincts that had been suppressed for 2,000 years began to return, and the residents of the new demon realm could respond correctly at the first moment. If it was the new demon realm in a normal state, when faced with the sky full of dead souls, the first reaction would be to find someone to greet them and invite them to their home as a guest. Only when the blood of the dead flowed like a river would they remember to resist bravely, and the resistance would be limited to self-defense, and they would never take the initiative to attack. A race that had been peaceful for 2,000 years would be so slow to this point. But thanks to the collapse of the Supreme Land, the shackles in the hearts of the demons were broken, so they could respond correctly like the real demons. No matter who they were, where they came from, since they were not pleasing to the eye and might be a threat to themselves, then they would crush them first. As for the negotiation, they would wait until the opponent was beaten to the point where they could not fight back, and their murderous nature had been mostly vented. Wang Lu did not see the subsequent development of the new demon realm, but he could more or less guess. The two great demon kings were powerhouses of the supreme level, and the demon lords and demon generals under their command were also elite troops. In addition, the new demon realm had 2,000 years of accumulation, so they still had the power to resist the Black Dynasty. Although it would be difficult at the beginning, the situation would become smoother as time went on. After all, the source of the Black Tide had been cut off, of course. When it came to the change of a world, Wang Lu could not predict it with 100% accuracy. Perhaps later on, the Black Tide would have a new change, and in turn, it would devour the new demon world. But until this point, Wang Lu had done his best. Next, we can finally go home, right? Wang Lu stood up from the mountain of corpses, dusted off the corpse energy on his clothes, and prepared to go home. The new demon world had been messed up by him, so the space blockade had weakened. Now, he could feel the location of 9 regions through the Spirit Sword Heavenly Talisman. Although it was difficult to directly penetrate the multi-layer space barrier and return to 9 regions with just one Spirit Sword Heavenly Talisman alone, but he had more than one Spirit Sword Heavenly Talisman in his hand. Wang Lu took out all the Spirit Sword Heavenly Talismans from his mustard seed bag and lined them up in a row. Without being stimulated, the immortal spirit energy contained in them was connected into a bundle, bursting out with amazing power. Humph, if Wang Wu saw this, she probably wouldn't be able to resist it for even a moment. She would immediately kneel down and beg me to share half of it with her. While saying that, Wang Lu took back 5 of them. According to his estimation, when the space barrier had been completely loosened, returning to 9 regions didn't need to be so wasteful. 5 heavenly talismans were more than enough. If he used too many, it might brew space turbulence, which would have the opposite effect. The next thing to do is to think about how to explain it to the sect's elders. Wang Lu's trip to the demon world was strongly supported by the sect. Whether it was the painstaking special training of Elder Lu Li or the special materials prepared for him by the Heavenly Sword Hall, behind all of these were actually the sect's deep expectations for his trip to the demon world. They were looking forward to his growth and also looking forward to his harvest in the demon world. However, at this time, it seemed that if he wanted to say growth, there was not much growth. In total, his trip to the demon world lasted for less than a month, and he didn't even fight against a few decent opponents. Of course, it was difficult for him to make great progress. However, when it came to the harvest, it was very rich. The scroll that recorded the dream-building technique alone could be called priceless. Although Wang Lu himself didn't like it, there were so many inner and outer court disciples in Spirit Sword Mountain, so there would always be someone suitable for cultivation. In addition, the demon jade was also a priceless treasure. Even without the assistance of the eternal tree, it had lost most of its effect, but its structure still contained a high research value. Then, it successfully resolved a major disaster for 9 regions, which was a boundless merit. Finally, witnessing the experience and lessons of the demon race in the past 2,000 years would also be of great benefit to the people of 9 regions. Wang Lu intended to go back and write a book. The title of the book was, Be Prepared for Danger in Times of Peace, 2,000 Years Sacrifice for the Fall of the Demon World. Then in the book, he intended to reveal some secrets in due time, such as the existence of the 3,000 great worlds, such as the fall of the demon race, such as an unknown threat that made Dixian afraid and the immortals and demons joined hands to face. He believed that there must be people in 9 regions who already knew these secrets. For example, the several elders of Heavenly Sword Hall should know more than him, but they were good at pretending to be stupid. However, these big shots would always have a reason not to reveal these secrets. That being the case, he would do it himself. He was the lead disciple of Spirit Sword Sect. Although he was already a Taoist master of the King Pill, he had been cultivating for less than 30 years, so he was still a junior in the immortal cultivation world. There were many things that he could do without scruples. Moreover, if some things were really secrets that couldn't be said, then as the lead disciple, he should be told in advance. The more secrets that couldn't be said, the more they couldn't be concealed. Thinking of this, Wang Lu wanted to laugh out loud. It had been a long time since his mind was so scattered. The excitement of going home could not be suppressed. Then, Wang Lu took a deep breath and stimulated the Spirit Sword Heavenly Talisman. According to the effect of the Heavenly Talisman, as long as he could pass through the layers of void and return to the 9 regions. After the Heavenly Talisman flashed, the scene in front of Wang Lu quickly distorted. According to his past experience, the scene in front of him would first shrink to a point, and then quickly unfold. And the unfolded scene should be the non-phase peak of Spirit Sword Sect. Bas. When the scene of the demon world was reduced to a point, Wang Lu suddenly felt that his line of sight was a bit blurred. A dark cloud floated over from nowhere and covered that point. This time, Wang Lu was shocked. The space conversion caused by the Spirit Sword Heavenly Talisman was actually disturbed by an external force? What kind of means could interfere with the operation of the Heavenly Talisman? Moreover, this dark cloud came and went like a ghost, and he didn't notice it at all. Was there an expert who deliberately plotted against him, or did he miss something when he calculated the way back home? No, the most important question now was, if the space conversion process was disturbed, could he still go back? The worst-case scenario was that he would be lost in the void forever. If he was lucky, he would be transferred to any place in 9 regions. Of course, it was not too good, because there were many mysterious places in 9 regions, and the cultivation base of King Pill was not particularly safe. Therefore, when Wang Lu noticed the abnormality, he immediately took out the 5 spare talismans. As soon as there was an obvious problem, he would immediately activate it and open another space passage. The next moment, the contracted space point stretched again. Wang Lu was slightly stunned and then put down his hand. Because the scene that unfolded was a piece of green mountains and clear water, and the surrounding was filled with light and abundant spiritual energy. Although he didn't recognize where it was, it must be somewhere in 9 regions. It seemed that although the process of the spatial transformation was disrupted, there were no major mistakes. As long as he returned to 9 regions, the problem would be mostly solved. Because as long as he was still in 9 regions, the Spirit Sword Heavenly Talisman was a trustworthy life-saving talisman. And Wang Lu didn't hesitate. After seeing the scene clearly, He immediately took out a heavenly talisman and stimulated its magical power. He saw the heavenly talisman in his hand break into thousands of starlight spots like broken glass, and then a whirlpool of immortal spirit energy rolled up, and then it dispersed and disappeared without a trace. There was no familiar non-phase peak, nor the familiar Blue River region. Even without the space conversion, this spirit sword heavenly talisman was just wasted. Wang Lu was very surprised. He quickly took out another heavenly talisman, but he didn't use it. Instead, he sank his primordial spirit into the talisman paper to sense the coordinates of the non-phase peak recorded in the talisman paper. After a while, he got nothing. Thus, the reason for the failure of the heavenly talisman was found. The spirit sword heavenly talisman couldn't find the location of the non-phase peak, so naturally, it couldn't convert the space and send Wang Lu back. But why couldn't it find the non-phase peak? As long as it was within the scope of 9 regions, unless a true immortal came down to Earth, even the sect leaders of the major sects would find it difficult to interfere with the coordinate locking of the heavenly talisman. In particular, in the past 2 years, the Heavenly Sword Hall upgraded the heavenly talisman, which encrypted the coordinate recording function, which completely eliminated the interference with the operation of the heavenly talisman that Wang Lu encountered in the battle against the Beast Master School on the Grand Cloud Mountain. So, who was stopping him from returning to Spirit Sword Mountain? Was it because of the previous Black Mist interference? Or was there someone behind the scenes, such as the Demon King who should have been buried together with the old demon world 2,000 years ago? For a time, the questions in Wang Lu's mind were almost mixed up. The questions came out one after another, but he couldn't find a clue to solve them. What was worse was that he couldn't even determine the current situation. Although the surroundings seemed to be full of birds and fragrant flowers, to be able to make the spirit sword heavenly talisman completely unable to sense the non-phase peak. This was comparable to the treatment of the demon world. Wang Lu searched for what he had learned, but still couldn't find a reasonable explanation. Could it be that he was really swept away by the turbulent space to the other 3,000 great worlds? If that was the case. While he was thinking, suddenly, there was a sound of footsteps in the distance. The so-called distance was really far away. Even with Wang Lu's hearing, it was still a bit blurry. The distance between them was at least 5 kilometers. However, the voices of those people were clearly distinguishable. Eldest brother, do we still have to go deeper? Why don't we take a rest here first? Lu Li, the experiential learning organized by the sect is not for us to come to the Savage Land for an outing. If we don't go deep into danger, how can we make progress? The only hope for the sect to rise in the next 100 years is us. As a member of the Golden Generation, you must not fall behind. Chapter 479. Wang Lu felt that his worldview was in danger of collapsing. Since his debut, Wang Lu could be considered to have seen a lot of things. Although his cultivation base had just reached the King Pill stage, his vision had already surpassed many Yuanying stage and even deity stage cultivators. The Golden King of the Western continent was a powerhouse who had surpassed the level of Holy One and embarked on the road to godhood. Wang Lu talked and laughed wittily with him. The gatekeeper of the group of immortal tombs, the ancient sword demon, who opened the road to immortality for the cultivators of a region, and Wang Lu had a battle of wits and courage with him. Then there was the trip to the demon world, where he single-handedly resolved the crisis of the Black Tide. The legend of Wang Lu's experience had far surpassed that of the vast majority of cultivators in 9 regions. However, perhaps the world was really full of strange things. The sages once said that in the world, there would always be people and things that would make your worldview collapse. And now, Wang Lu finally deeply realized this truth. Listening to the conversation of the group of cultivators from 100 miles away, he suddenly felt that his imagination seemed to be a bit insufficient. Lu Li? Golden Generation? The Savage Land? If it was just one of them, it might be a coincidence, but when the 3 of them were linked together, no matter how he thought about it, there was only one result. The management training program of Lingjian School. Things started from 200 years ago. At that time, Lingjian School was in its darkest and lowest period since its establishment. During this period, it was even repeatedly proposed by the members of the Wanxian League to downgrade its grade and expel it from the 5 uniques. The several assemblies and votes were also based on the astonishing achievements of Lingjian School during the Second Great War of Immortals and Demons 2,000 years ago. However, the number of votes for the proposal was getting closer and closer. However, as the saying goes, when things reach an extreme, they will move in the opposite direction. Since then, Lingjian's school seemed to be blessed by the heaven and had one fortuitous encounter after another. First, several of the great elders broke through the bottleneck of their cultivation base and became the influential giants in the immortal cultivation world. The power of the 5 uniques of the Wanxian League was completely stabilized. At the same time, the younger generation was full of talents, and some of them were even praised by the elders of the Heavenly Sword Hall as having unprecedented aptitude. They were known as the Golden Generation of Lingjian School, and the sect had high hopes for them. Whether or not Lingjian School could rise from the weakest of the 5 uniques, the key lay in the development of the Golden Generation. After all, the potential of the elders was limited, and they did not have much lifespan left. Whether the Lingjian School could advance further still depended on the performance of the young people. In order to let the Golden Generation display their talents, the elders of the Lingjian School could be said to have painstaking efforts. They poured all their efforts into this group of cultivators, sparing no expense to let them grow as soon as possible. After all, before this, the Lingjian School had been suppressed for too long. However, this eagerness finally went to the extreme and produced a counterproductive effect. 150 years ago, the lead disciple of the sect at that time achieved great success in the King Pill, and several of his junior brothers and sisters had also reached peak shoot on stage, only one step away from the King Pill. Moreover, their real strength was far better than the ordinary King Pill. At this time, the elders of the sect very radically proposed a management trainee program, hoping to stimulate the further growth of these disciples. The so-called management trainee program was to send the Golden Generation to the Savage Land, expand the territory in that uncivilized land, and establish the power of the Lingjian School. Each of the disciples would assume sole responsibility in this process and become the ruler who controlled the land. This was also the first part of the ambitious grand strategy of the elders of Spirit Sword sect at that time. At that time, the Lingjian School was sparsely populated, and its resources were poor. The school's wealth accumulation and sphere of influence were even inferior to some middle-rank sections. However, this problem could not be solved by relying on a few talented disciples to advance by leaps and bounds in the path of immortal cultivation. After all, no matter how high an individual's cultivation base was, it was only an individual matter and could not benefit the sect. Therefore, at that time, the elders of Spirit Sword sect formulated a 100-year strategy, the first part of which was the management trainee program. The elders planned to use 20 years to let the Golden Generation become the sole ruler, and then transfer most of them back from the Savage Land to the 9 regions. After that, the Lingjian School would be backed by the developed Savage Land, which could absorb its rich resources. In front of them, under the guidance of the elders, a group of elite disciples would expand the territory for the sect. After 100 years, the Lingjian School would completely control the Blue River region and have its own forces in the 9 regions. If everything went well, they could even compete with Shangjing sect. Even if it didn't go well, at least they could get rid of the current predicament. The elders of Spirit Sword sect had poured all their efforts into this 100-year strategy, which contained their inner depression of witnessing the decline of Spirit Sword sect for many years, as well as their yearning for the rise of Spirit Sword sect. However, at this time, they had to sigh with emotion that their strategy was too radical. Putting the hope of a 5 unique sect on a group of young people with at most 50 to 60 years of cultivation was simply like pulling a seedling to help it grow. Even if the Golden Generation at that time repeatedly created miracles and constantly refreshed people's expectations of them, it didn't mean that they were omnipotent. In fact, a large part of them had already overdrawn their potential. There was a limit to one's strength. When a sect overdrafted its disciples, the magnificent edifice would collapse with a loud bang. Wang Lu still didn't understand the specific process, but he at least knew that the Golden Generation of the Lingjian School was nearly wiped out in the management trainee program. Hundreds of talented disciples fell, and among the cultivators of the same generation, there were only 10 Heavenly Sword Hall elders left. One of them had been living in seclusion and had never shown up until now. What was even more tragic was that, although his masters had never mentioned it, there was a very obvious phenomenon. Other sects, from Shangjing sect to some low-rank sects, all had their own elders. Only Lingjian School didn't. Feng Yin Taoist master, who had only cultivated for more than 200 years, was the most senior person in the sect. In other words, the fall of the Golden Generation was accompanied by the elders of Spirit Sword sect. More than 100 years ago, it was still a mystery what kind of tragic disaster the Spirit Sword sect encountered during their pioneering operation in the Savage Land. Over the years, Whether it was from the inside of the sect or with the help of the external forces of the Wanxian League, Wang Lu had found nothing. Later on, he lost interest in continuing to explore. After all, it was a tragedy that the elders of the sect did not want to mention, so why would he bother to open that scar? Unexpectedly, now that he had given up exploring the secret, he appeared in front of him. The group of young cultivators who were walking hundreds of miles away sounded like the golden generation of the Lingjian school. In other words, the failure of the transfer of Spirit Sword Heavenly Talisman actually sent him to more than 100 years ago? Did he complete the time travel? No. This was a big deal, so he had to seriously confirm it. After all, the more absurd the speculation, the more cautious it was. Thereupon, Wang Lu closed his breath and concentrated his mind. He then used his hearing ability to carefully listen to the conversation 5 miles away. In short, Lu Li, since you've come to the Savage Land, you must forge ahead and not waste your talent. Big brother, you're overflowing with talent and omnipotent, but I'm just a mortal. Ha ha ha, junior brother Lu Li, you're naughty again. We're both members of the first echelon of this generation, so there's no qualitative difference in the aptitude and perception between us. How could there be a genius and a mortal? What you lack are nothing more than 2 things. First, focus. You have too many distractions. You have to learn talismans, you have to learn array formations, you have to learn blacksmithing, you have to learn everything that the elders of the sect can teach you. Even if your perception is amazing, if you're distracted, your cultivation speed naturally can't catch up with mine. Second, you don't have enough confidence. Because you have too many distractions, your cultivation speed is lacking compared to other junior brothers and sisters. You feel ashamed of your inferiority, so you even give up treatment and begin to be more obsessed with the cultivation of miscellaneous things, in order to find the balance. But the more you do this, the slower your cultivation on the right path is, until today. Damn, big brother, please spare me? I'm just being polite to you, but you actually talk incessantly and even expose my sore spot. Is there a senior brother like you? Hey, do you mind? It should be okay, your crushed junior sister Mu Ying is in the other team, so she can't hear these words. Damn, Lu Li, you actually have a crush on Mu Ying. Big news. Big brother. Ah, you can't even tell me about your crush? But that day, I saw you and Yi Yun singing loudly after getting drunk. You said everything, so I thought you didn't care about it anymore. Hey, Lu Li, you actually drank and sang with senior sister Yi Yun? Big brother. Okay, I won't say anything. Don't be angry, I just want to encourage you. It's rare for us to be in the same team, and for the next 10 years, we will be together day and night. We will overcome the thorns and thorns together in this barren land, so you must be motivated. Big brother, don't worry, I am very motivated now, and I can't wait to reach the nascent soul realm. Your Shudon foundation is still not stable. Although it is good to be motivated, why are you so anxious to reach the nascent soul realm? Because only when I reach the nascent soul realm can I beat you, King Pill bitch. Junior brother, you are being naughty again. With how many distractions you have, even if you reach the nascent soul realm, you still can't beat me. I am going to kill you now. Yes, you are right. They should be people from Lingjian school. 5 miles away, Wang Lu gently nodded, confirming his guess. Although he didn't know the other 7 people in this group of 8 except for Lu Li, this style of conversation should be unique to Lingjian school. Moreover, the elder Lu Li that Wang Lu was familiar with was an expert at the peak of the nascent soul realm. But at this time, elder Lu Li was only at the Shudon realm. If it wasn't for the old man's recent excessive indulgence, which caused his cultivation to drop sharply, it could only be attributed to time traveling back to the past. The result is really time traveling, and it is more than 100 years at once. But it is a pity that I didn't get the bonus plug-in for time traveling. Wang Lu sighed and then prepared to get up and leave. Martial Uncle Lu Li and the others were moving very fast, and their goal was in the direction where he was standing. But Wang Lu didn't intend to meet them so early. This time traveling was too bizarre, and the principle was completely unexplainable. Wang Lu didn't intend to make any mistakes because of the disordered time and space. In the stories of time traveling that he knew, there was no lack of time travelers who came into contact with their predecessors, and the predecessors suddenly disappeared. As a result, history was greatly changed, and red demons wreaked havoc in the world. If this caused Elder Lu Li to disappear because of this reason, he would be guilty. However, just as Wang Lu stood up, he suddenly heard a curious voice in his ears. "Excuse me, what did you mean by time traveling just now?" Turning around, he saw a handsome young cultivator wearing a red and white robe that was 70 to 80% similar to his, standing there with a curious look on his face. Wang Lu was startled, because he had just heard this voice. It was the current chief disciple of Lingjian School, who was supposed to be 5 miles away. This encounter really came a little too fast. Chapter 480. This sudden encounter made Wang Lu very surprised. The previous moment, the other party was still 5 miles away, and the next moment, he was already in front of him. Moreover, he didn't even notice it. This kind of method was indeed a bit fierce. Although Wang Lu had never been known for his keen perception, and at this time, he had just experienced a time and space transformation, so his consciousness was somewhat fuzzy, but as the lead disciple of Lingjian School, even if it was his shortcoming in immortal cultivation, it was still above average. However, the other party was actually able to completely hide from his perception and approach him. The strength of this golden generation big brother could not help but secretly surprise Wang Lu. From the faint magical power fluctuation that the other party emitted, his cultivation base was similar to his own. Both of them were low-rank King Pill, and his magical power was extremely vigorous, 10 times better than the ordinary King Pill, which was also similar to his own. Although Wang Lu couldn't see through his cultivation method for a moment, he expected that it would not be an ordinary one. At the same time, his temperament was as sharp as a sword, but it did not appear to be threatening, showing that his attainment in the way of the sword had reached the realm of following his heart's desire. The sharpness of the way of the sword could be freely controlled. And this was a realm that many Yuanying stage sword cultivators had not mastered. Sure enough, he was indeed worthy to be the big brother of the golden generation of Lingjian School. At least, he was not under Shangjing sect's Qianghua Ferry. While Wang Lu was carefully looking at the other party was also looking at him. After just a few glances, he was full of surprise. "Who exactly are you, Your Excellency? Your dress seems to have a lot of relationship with my Lingjian School. Although your cultivation method is strange, it faintly has the characteristics of my Lingjian School. You should clearly be a disciple of Spirit Sword sect. But I've never seen you in the dozens of years of immortal cultivation." After finishing his words, Wang Lu was also surprised. His clothes were similar to the man's. Lingjian School didn't pay much attention to the school's uniform for more than 100 years. The basic framework of the true disciple's uniform had never changed. The difference between his clothes and the man's was only a little bit. The key was, how did he know that the martial arts he practiced had a lot to do with Lingjian School? Although he did cultivate in Spirit Sword Mountain for decades, and most of the content he learned was taught by the elders of Spirit Sword sect, the main body of the method system was Primal Chaos Heaven-Splitting Sword Qi, which was inherited from the ancient sword demon and had nothing to do with the Lingjian School. Although the other non-phase method was an authentic Spirit Sword method, it was created by his master Wang Wu, which also had little to do with the Lingjian School's heritage. As for the other miscellaneous arts, such as the Tao of formations and talismans, he had not dabbled in them yet, so they would not affect the main body of his cultivation technique. Judging from the fluctuation of magical power alone, he had almost no connection with Lingjian School. But how could he determine that he was a disciple of Spirit Sword sect? While Wang Lu was still in a state of amazement, that big brother continued to infer, "In theory, you are a disciple of Spirit Sword sect, but the main body of your cultivation method is not passed down by Spirit Sword sect. Your age should be younger than me by a few years, but the realm of your Fa Li is not below mine. This kind of amazing talent should not be unknown, and with this kind of aptitude, you should have learned the sect's supreme stellar sword mantra. But now it seems, I say, could it be that you are the illegitimate child of the sect leader?" The big brother suspiciously looked at Wang Lu, and after a long time, he suddenly patted his head. "Sorry, I'm talking to myself again. This is an old problem. Please don't remember it. Before, I forgot to introduce myself. I am the lead disciple of Lingjian School, Ouyang Shang. May I know your honorable name?" Surname Wang, given name Lu, I'm that. Speaking of his origin, Wang Lu suddenly felt that it was a bit difficult to explain. However, before Wang Lu could finish his words, Ouyang Shang laughed and patted him on the shoulder. It's okay. Your identity is particularly sensitive, so it's okay if it's inconvenient to say it. As long as we have a tacit understanding, it's fine. Ha ha ha, I didn't expect that sect leader, that serious old guy, actually knows how to live a good life. Wang Lu thought for a moment and felt that based on the current situation, acting as the illegitimate child of the sect leader seemed to be not bad. Although there were certainly many things that couldn't be explained, with the temperament of this big brother of Spirit Sword sect, the next development would certainly be like this. Ha ha ha, let me introduce to everyone, this is the illegitimate child of our sect leader, junior brother Wang Lu. This time, he came to participate in the management trainee program with us. His identity is particularly sensitive, so I hope that everyone can take care of him. Don't ask about things that shouldn't be asked. Since we are all from Spirit Sword sect, we must live in harmony and make contributions together in this savage land. Then the other people could only hold back their curiosity and force themselves to live in harmony with him and make contributions together. In this way, although there would be a lot of awkwardness, it would reduce a lot of trouble. For example, why would there suddenly be one more person in the management trainee program of Lingjian School? In the Savage Land, which was regarded as the back garden of Lingjian School, why would there be an unfamiliar King Pill? Now, it could be explained with the reason of the illegitimate child of the sect leader. Although they didn't know whether this big brother Ouyang Shang came up with this explanation intentionally or unintentionally, but since it was useful, then let's just use it. A moment later, the other 7 people arrived on their flying swords. In the team, the young Lu Li was among them. Different from the later 6th elder, who had a distinct black and white beard, at this time, Lu Li still looked extremely inexperienced. His miscellaneous knowledge had not yet been thoroughly mastered, which could be seen from his clothes. On his black and white robe, there were all kinds of ornaments hanging endlessly. In addition to the 3 mustard seed bags on his waist, there was also a dirty abacus, 2 withered oranges, and a small totem composed of feathers and animal bones. It could be seen that at this time, Lu Li had learned a lot of miscellaneous knowledge, which made people unable to restrain themselves from laughing. The leader of the team was a girl in a red and white dress. She had a gorgeous appearance and a generous temperament. While still in mid-air, she frowned and loudly complained, "Big brother, don't be so elusive. Uncle sect leader didn't teach you the earth-shrinking technique to scare people." "Hey, who is this? Why does he look like you?" The several people behind the girl also showed a puzzled expression. The big brother Ouyang Shang laughed out loud and clearly. "Ha ha ha, let me introduce him to everyone. This is the illegitimate child of our sect leader, junior brother Wang Lu. This time, he came to participate in the management trainee program with us. His identity is particularly sensitive, so I hope everyone can take care of him. Don't ask about things that shouldn't be asked. Since we are all from Spirit Sword sect, we must live in harmony and make contributions together in this savage land." Then, the 7 junior brothers and sisters showed a twisted expression as if they were constipated. The gorgeous girl couldn't help but take half a step forward and asked, "Big brother, this person is obviously..." Before she could finish, a hand appeared on the girl's head, rubbing her slightly fluffy curly hair. Ouyang Shang, with a generous elder's attitude, softly said, "Kai Xia, be good, don't make things difficult for others." The cheeks of the girl named Kai Xia immediately turned red. There was a bit of shyness, but also a bit of anger. Being touched by her big brother Ouyang Shang, no matter how angry she was, she couldn't vent it. Finally, she angrily stomped her foot and then turned around to go back. Ouyang Shang's smile was also a bit twisted. Just now, Kai Xia stomped her foot. This junior sister who cultivated fiery sword had always been straightforward and fiery. Moreover, her attack power was really amazing. His foot most likely needed to be nurtured. In short, we now have a strong support. Although junior brother Wang Lu is young, his strength is outstanding, and he has already achieved King Pill. With such a strong support, I believe that our next wasteland reclamation operation will be smoother. Therefore, I decided to make a little modification to the plan. Instead of camping in Western Mountain Jade Forest, we will go to Blessed Fountain. As a result, the junior brothers and sisters didn't have the time to be curious that this young man named Wang Lu was actually the Taoist master of King Pill before they were stunned by Ouyang Shang's words. A tall male cultivator widened his eyes and asked, "Wait a minute, instead of camping in Jade Forest, we will go to Blessed Fountain? Big brother, can't you be a bit more reliable? Camping in Jade Forest is already very risky. Going to Blessed Fountain is just courting death. It is said that there is a gathering place of the 1,000-year-old flood dragon over there. Ouyang Shang said with a smile, "It's just a 1,000-year-old flood dragon, what's so great about it?" F***CK, if you think it's nothing, then why don't you fight one-on-one for us to see? You've just achieved King Pill and you're already so arrogant. When you reach Yuanying stage, you will definitely go and provoke the heavenly tribulation to seek ascension. Junior sister Kai Xia, don't be so irritable. I know that the strength of the 1,000-year-old flood dragon is comparable to that of a Yuanying stage-old monster. With our team alone, we can barely resist it. Considering that there are still shrimp soldiers and crab generals under the flood dragon's command, we will undoubtedly lose. However, that's only considering the 8 of us. Now that we have junior brother Wang Lu, our chance of winning is more than 70%. Considering that we are all the sex elites, it is likely that some of us will have a breakthrough in the battle. Counting this part, our chance of winning is more than 90%. If we don't dare to bet even if we have 90% chance of winning, then we don't need to come to the savage land to explore the land, we can just directly go into seclusion in the sect. Hey, how can you be so wishful thinking? With just one more person, you've already changed from certain defeat to 90% chance of winning. Do you think junior brother Wang Lu is an elder of Spirit Sword sect? Junior sister Kai Xia, you have to believe in the power of academia. My conclusion is strictly and accurately calculated. If you think it's wrong, you're welcome to check it. With that, Ouyang Shang stretched out his hand and summoned more than 100 calculation talismans and then sent them to Kai Xia. When the girl saw them, she immediately felt dizzy. She hastily waved her hand and said, "Forget it, you're the big brother, whatever you say is right, okay?" While Ouyang Shang and Kai Xia were quarreling, Wang Lu was lost in thought. There were too many mysteries in time travel. For example, right now, Wang Lu was very curious about one thing. If before they met him, Ouyang Shang and the others were planning to camp in a place called Jade Forest, then now it seemed that they had changed their destination to Blessed Fountain. Then, history was likely to have changed. If history could be changed, then, could the tragedy of the golden generation of Lingjian School be avoided? If that could be done then, would there still be him, the lead disciple of Spirit Sword sect? Chapter 481. All kinds of conjectures about time and space were not uncommon in 9 regions. From the supreme cultivators whose cultivation base was close to ascending to immortality to the tea-house storytellers who loved imagination, they all had their own conjectures about time and space. Of course, it was just a conjecture, because even the most brilliant cultivator could not manipulate time on a large scale. A cup of immortal tea was the legend and myth of cultivators, but there had never been a real example of time and space travel. According to Wang Lu's understanding, there were currently several popular conjectures. One of them was that history could not be changed. Even if someone could go back to the past by some means, they would find that they could not change anything that had happened, because their time and space travel itself was already doomed by history. Another one was the parallel space theory. People could indeed change history by going back to the past, but from the moment they went back, the history had branched off, and they could only change one of the branches. Relatively speaking, Wang Lu preferred the second hypothesis, because at least the second hypothesis made people have the possibility to exert their subjective initiative. For example, in this case, if Wang Lu's efforts could change the tragic experience of Lingjian School, then he would certainly go all out. As for the other branches that had not been changed, in any case, it had nothing to do with him, so he didn't need to care about it. Moreover, if his time and space travel was already doomed by history, then there was no reason for him to cultivate in Spirit Sword Mountain for 20 years, but no elder had ever mentioned it to him. Not to mention that he still clearly remembered that in the immortal gathering, he almost had no chance to enter the mountain because of the blurred vision of the sect leader. If they really remembered him, how could they make such a mistake? Therefore, from now on, he had to correct his mentality. Everything that he did in the Savage Land was to reverse history. If he did it well enough, the golden generation of Lingjian School might not die. Regarding the golden generation, Wang Lu actually had no feelings for them. After all, most of the elders who taught him his skills were unknown in the golden generation at that time. In other words, if the golden generation did not die, would Feng Yin still be the head of the Lingjian School? Would the position of Elder of Heavenly Sword Hall still belong to Feng He, Lu Xian, and the others? Especially Wang Wu. Would she still be the Wang Wu of today? However, Wang Lu did not intend to be indifferent to what had happened in the past just because of these things. In Spirit Sword Mountain, after getting along with the elders for decades, Wang Lu could clearly feel that the pain of that year was a shadow that they could not forget for a lifetime. If they could change the past, they would definitely choose to change it, even if they had to sacrifice everything now. Wang Lu had received a lot of kindness from the elders of Spirit Sword Mountain, so at this time, it was time to repay them. Half a day later, the group of 9 people passed through a jadeite forest and advanced along the steep mountain path until a clear spring appeared in the distance. Well, we finally see Blessed Fountain, but we have consumed a lot of energy along the way. Let's camp here and go to Blessed Fountain tomorrow. The big brother of Spirit Sword Sect, Ouyang Shang, thought for a moment and then made a decision. Then there was a burst of cheers from the back of the team. Several young cultivators directly lay down on the ground and didn't want to move even half a step. Ouyang Shang shrugged slightly and shook his head. Obviously, he was slightly dissatisfied with the laziness of his junior brothers and sisters. Then he turned his head and whispered to the young man beside him, who was also wearing a red and white robe and whose appearance was somewhat similar to him. "I've let you see a joke. These junior brothers and sisters are really not up to standard." "It's you who is too demanding," Wang Lu lightly responded. Along the way, it was not a smooth journey. At this time, there was no black tide that Wang Lu later saw in the savage land of the Western Mountain, but the indigenous creatures of the savage land were still an important threat that could not be ignored. In the jadeite forest, the group of people was attacked by monsters. A group of no less than 100 mountain spirits and tree monsters that had cultivated inner cores surrounded them. Their attacks were like a tide, and their leader was a ferocious human-faced owl. Its strength was comparable to that of an ordinary peak-stage gold core cultivator. Although there were 2 Taoist Master King Pill in the team of Spirit Sword Sect, after fighting all the way, everyone's consumption was not small. However, in Wang Lu's view, it was already incredible that this group of people could successfully break through the encirclement without any casualties. The team led by Ouyang Shang was not even the strongest elite of the Golden Generation. The strength of the 8 disciples was uneven, and they were evenly selected from more than 100 disciples to form a team. Their comprehensive strength was similar to that of other teams, and they didn't have the strength to go against the heaven. However, in the jadeite forest, the human-faced owl beast and its minions had the terrifying strength bonus. However, under the leadership of Ouyang Shang, the group of people was more daunting than dangerous. During this period, although Wang Lu had made a lot of contributions, he didn't show his full ability. The success of breaking through the encirclement mainly depended on the strength of this team of cultivators. And this strength was really considerable. Although it was not to the point of going against the heaven, this team of cultivators was the top elite in any sect, and at that time, there were actually more than 10 such teams in Lingjian School. However, Ouyang Shang was still not satisfied. Compared with the cultivators of the same generation, our group of cultivators is indeed very strong, but it's still far from enough to make up for the decline of Lingjian School in the past thousands of years. Compared with the other sects of the 5 uniques, the foundation of Lingjian School is too poor. It's at an absolute disadvantage in any aspect, and there's not much time left for us to catch up. Not much. Do you need to be in such a hurry? There's no other way, there's no hurry. The gap between Lingjian School and the other sects is widened little by dozens of generations of cultivators over thousands of years, and the time that Lingjian School can use to catch up is none other than our golden generation. I don't know how much luck Lingjian School has to be able to gather so many talented and loyal disciples in this generation. When our generation passes away, I'm afraid it's impossible for us to have the same luck again. And to catch up with the gap of thousands of years in one generation, that's easier said than done. Wang Lu asked with a smile. Is it necessary to be so obsessed with catching up with the gap? To be able to stabilize the position of one of the 5 uniques is already good enough. The one who takes the top gets the middle, and the one who takes the middle gets the bottom. The reason why Lingjian School has declined from its heyday until now is because it doesn't want to make progress. The biggest reason is that it doesn't want to make progress. Ouyang Shang shook his head and said, right now, in the Wanxian League, Shengjing School is the dominant sect, which has an absolute and unshakable lead over the other sections. However, whether it's the Royal Soldier Sect or the 10,000 Arts Sect, they have never given up on catching up with Shengjing School, and Shengjing School has never lost its sense of crisis. But they are still like this. How could our Lingjian School, which has fallen behind, just let it go? Only by redoubling our efforts and bearing a heavier burden than any other sect could we possibly catch up step by step. The ancients said that everyone is born with talent, so for Lingjian school to suddenly produce a golden generation, presumably, there must be a historical mission that we need to undertake. After saying that, Ouyang Shang smiled. I'm sorry, I started talking to myself again. Alas, since I was a child, I have this problem. As long as I open my mouth, I can't stop. Sometimes, I would accidentally say something that I shouldn't say. However, please believe that I treat people with sincerity, and I would never intentionally make things difficult for others. Alas, unfortunately, there are very few people in this world who understand me. Not to mention outside, even in the mountain, I was often scolded by my master and uncles. The most hateful thing is that there are a few incompetent junior brothers and sisters who suggested me to wear a chew, which is simply outrageous. How could a mere chew stop your mouth? Ouyang Shang gawked for a moment, and then nodded. That's reasonable. How can we rely on external force to change our own problem? On this point, I never thought about it. Junior brother Wang Lu is indeed a genius cultivator who could achieve the king pill at such a young age. There are many things that I can learn from you. Hearing this, Wang Lu completely realized that this guy's mouth was hopeless, so he was too lazy to continue talking. He directly blocked his hearing and no longer paid attention to Ouyang Shang, who was talking non-stop. Although this was a bit cruel to Ouyang Shang, who was in the mood to talk, but Wang Lu really didn't have the mood to strike up a conversation with him. At the same time, Wang Lu was also deeply moved. Although this senior brother Ouyang's mouth was a bit messy, and his brain was a bit off, but when it came to major issues, he was actually very clear-headed and rational. His thinking was actually not wrong at all. With Lingjian School's current situation, if they wanted to truly stabilize the structure of the 5 uniques, or even advance further in the cultivation world, they could only put in more effort than the other sections. The Golden Generation was a heaven-sent opportunity, and also the only opportunity. If it was replaced by anyone, they would not let it go. Moreover, along the way, Wang Lu could see that Ouyang Shang was not all brawn and no brains. Although he had an almost pathological obsession with becoming stronger, in the specific process of implementation, Ouyang Shang had actually always controlled the risk within a cautious range. For example, this temporary change of route to Blessed Fountain was made after taking into account that Wang Lu's addition would enhance the team's strength. And the fierce battle in Jadeite Forest had also completely proved that his calculation was accurate. The group of people just happened to reduce the risk of the battle to a level where there was no surprise and no danger. Such a person was indeed worthy of the name of the sect's senior brother. In a sense, he was even more competent than him. Compared to Ouyang Shang, Wang Lu's personal style was too distinct, and he was not approachable enough. Then the next question was, since there was no problem with Ouyang Shang, what was the tragedy that eventually led to the destruction of the Golden Generation? While he was thinking about it, he suddenly heard Ouyang Shang change the subject. He no longer talked about the impact of the backward construction of the public cafeteria of Spirit Sword Mountain on the cultivation base of the sect's disciples. Instead, he proposed, Junior brother Wang Lu, I think it's not too late, why don't we go fishing? Do you mean the rumor that a certain elder received 250 million gold spirit stones from Royal Soldier Sect to overthrow the rule of the sect leader, and then see which junior brother and junior sister are fooled? Whoever is fooled is a stupid fish. Junior brother Wang Lu, how did you come up with such a perverted game? But this time I mean it literally. Just the two of us fishing. With that, Ouyang Shang pointed to the distance. In the distance, under the setting sun, the blessed fountain was glittering with thousands of golden scales. Ouyang Shang actually wanted to team up with Wang Lu and go to Blessed Fountain in advance. I finally understand how the Golden Generation died. Chapter 482. For Ouyang Shang's proposal to go fishing at Blessed Fountain, Wang Lu didn't hesitate to agree. First, Wang Lu really wanted to know the real purpose of Ouyang Shang. He asked him to form a team to go to Blessed Fountain ahead of time. Was it really for fishing? Second, Wang Lu didn't put a mere Blessed Fountain in his eyes. Although Blessed Fountain was still a dangerous place full of thorns for the Golden Generation of Spirit Sword Sect, for a person who had created one miracle after another in his more than 20 years of debut, the 1,000-year-old flood dragon residing in Blessed Fountain was actually not enough. Even if Wang Lu couldn't win, he still had enough strength to safely retreat. And Ouyang Shang was also a straightforward person. When Wang Lu agreed, he explained it to Kai Xia. We'll go out for a walk first. You guys stay here and don't run around. If you encounter something, remember to inform me in time. Then he pulled Wang Lu and disappeared without a trace, leaving the stunned Kai Xia standing in the same place. She didn't even have the time to step on Ouyang Shang's foot. The two of them flew together from the cliff of the mountain all the way to the bank of Blessed Fountain. Although the journey was not far, along the way, the two of them could perceive that there were a lot of hidden dangers nearby. It's indeed worthy to be called the Savage Land. It can always give people stimulation and uplift their spirits. After waving his sword to drive away an overly curious strange bird, Ouyang Shang had already stepped on the cobblestone on the side of Blessed Fountain. And Wang Lu was right behind him. After landing, he went straight to the point. If there's anything you want to say, can you say it now? It's really possible? Ouyang Shang showed a pleasantly surprised expression. Obviously, in his decades of life, there were very few people who said to him, "Just say what you want to say," such generous words. Only the useful parts. That's a lot. Ouyang Shang's interest was not diminished. Obviously, for him, the concept of useful was too broad. Perhaps discussing whether to eat savory tofu pudding or sweet tofu pudding tonight was enough to be an important topic. Very well, let me be clear. It's limited to the top 2 specific matters related to our fishing operation. Each matter must not exceed 1,000 words. Ouyang Shang was shocked. At that moment, his gaze on Wang Lu became sharp, as if he was looking at his natural enemy. This fellow actually used a single sentence to seal off his joy of speaking freely. The bloodline of the sect leader truly lived up to its name. However, since that was the case, then he would just have to do official business. This time, we are indeed here to fish. There is a 1,000-year-old flood dragon in the Blessed Fountain. It is the biggest obstacle to our base here, and I plan to use the next month to gather everyone's strength to expel or subdue it. I believe you can also calculate that for the current us, this goal is very difficult. Wang Lu said, according to the popular formula of Royal Soldier Sect, the possibility of us reaching the goal without any loss is less than 1%. There is an 80% chance that both sides will suffer. Among the 9 of us, at least 2 or 3 people will fall. You have the internal combat deduction formula of Royal Soldier Sect? If it's convenient, I'd like to learn from you, but back to the topic at hand. It was rare for Ouyang Shang to take the initiative to return to the topic at hand. It could be seen that he was bound to waste a lot of words on the next topic. The difficulty of the goal is relative to the present. But in the next month, I will make the strength of the team go up a big step so that we have a 70% chance of defeating the opponent. At that time, I will really start the decisive battle. If we want to complete this evolution in 1 month, there is only one way to go: actual combat. The target of the actual combat is the 1,000-year-old flood dragon in the Blessed Fountain, as well as its shrimp soldiers and crab generals. I believe that with the talent of the junior brothers and sisters, every time they fight, they will have a great harvest. Coupled with their decades of cultivation base in the mountain, their progress will be very rapid. But from another point of view, the first battle will be very dangerous, especially for the junior brothers and sisters with the lowest cultivation base, as well as those with higher cultivation base than them, but especially like to sacrifice themselves to save others. Caught off guard, it is likely that there will be heavy casualties. Before he could finish, Wang Lu interrupted him. So you asked me to scout ahead of time? Yes. At least we have to find out the actual situation of the flood dragon. The current intelligence is completely based on the notes left by the elder who came to the Savage Land to pick herbs by chance, so the error may be quite astonishing. The information about the 1,000-year-old flood dragon was updated 30 years ago, so it is not unusual for there to be any changes in the past 30 years. I don't want to bring the junior brothers and sisters tomorrow to explore the Savage Land, only to find that the situation is completely out of control and dangerous. Wang Lu asked with interest, "You are worried that the junior brothers and sisters will be in danger, but aren't you afraid that something will happen to you if you go fishing first?" Of course not. I am the big brother of the Lingjian school. How can I fall here? Ouyang Shang was very generous. And if even I am afraid, what about the junior brothers and sisters? How can the management trainee program of the Lingjian school be carried out? So I must not be afraid, and I will not be afraid. My courage will support me to keep moving forward. Hearing this, Wang Lu could not help but sigh in his heart. It was really a pity that this guy died that year. If he could survive. If Heavenly Sword Hall could have such an elder. Unfortunately, all of these were just if. Because Wang Lu already knew the end of Ouyang Shang, he felt that it was a pity that Ouyang Shang was in high spirits at this time. Unfortunately, he still didn't know why Ouyang Shang died, and he didn't know where the catastrophe that even the elders of Spirit Sword Sect could not escape came from. Otherwise, he would go to the Spirit Sword Mountain to report to the elders, even if it meant exposing his identity as a time traveler. He must stop all of this from happening. But now, even if he went to the Spirit Sword Mountain, there was nothing he could do. He had no way to prove that he was a time traveler. The phenomenon of Lingjian school being separated from the previous generation was too serious, and he knew very little about the previous generation of elders, so there was no way he could prove that he was a time traveler. And even if he could prove that he was inextricably linked with the Lingjian school, it was still a fantasy to want the Lingjian school to cancel the management trainee program. After all, at this time, he was just a time traveler, and the big brother and lead disciple who could influence the decision of the sect was Ouyang Shang. Because of this, Wang Lu followed Ouyang Shang closely, ready to act according to the situation. Although in theory, his strength as Taoist Master King Pill might not be enough to go against the heaven, after so many years of cultivation, he had done too many things that couldn't be calculated by theory. Very well, then let me see what kind of ability this Blessed Fountain's Flood Dragon has. With that, Wang Lu took the lead and stepped into the Blessed Fountain one step ahead of Ouyang Shang. The moment his feet fell into the water, the creature in the depths of the fountain was suddenly awakened. Roar! With a roar that shook the water surface, a water column soared into the sky. Wang Lu propped up his non-phase sword defense and firmly stood firm under the impact of the water column, stepping on the burst of water under his feet. His posture was indescribably cool and calm. However, the complexion of Ouyang Shang, who was next to the water, suddenly changed. Junior brother Wang Lu, be careful. Because after the water column reached the highest point, it turned into rain all over the sky. The rain pattered on the vegetation on the shore, but it brought forth a pungent smoke. The plants that were splashed by the water droplets withered and turned yellow, and the beasts in the forest fell to the ground. Their fur curled up, blood dripped, and they died in pain. The water of the blessed fountain had unexpectedly turned into a highly toxic substance in an instant. The toxicity was far more violent than imagined. In the depths of the savage land near Blessed Fountain, the creatures that had lived here for a long time were no longer simple characters. However, under the corrosion of the poisonous water, they had no resistance. The residual power of the water column was already like this. Being in the center of the impact of the water column, the pressure that Wang Lu had to bear could be imagined. However, Wang Lu didn't care about this at all. After propping up his defense with his non-phase sword defense, he still had the strength to stab his primal chaos heaven-splitting sword Qi underwater. The sword Qi was extremely soft and gentle. It quietly eroded down the water column, extending all the way until it touched a domain that should not be violated. The next moment, a huge sense of crisis surged in the hearts of Wang Lu and Ouyang Shang at the same time. Let's go! On the water column, Wang Lu warned while controlling the sword of Mount Kuan to fly up, no longer provoking the flood dragon in the blessed fountain. Ouyang Shang was even more vigilant. Without waiting for Wang Lu to open his mouth, he had already escaped with the ground shrinking technique. The next moment, the sky above blessed fountain was covered with dark clouds. Only a flash of lightning could be heard, followed by a torrential downpour. The rain was like a curtain, as if the Milky Way was pouring down to the ground. The water level of the pool that was not full began to rise rapidly. The water swallowed everything on the shore and expanded into a wide lake. And in the depths of the lake, countless pairs of fierce eyes suddenly opened. Ha ha ha, the feeling of teasing a yuanying stage-old monster is quite cool. At this time, 10 miles away, Wang Lu and Ouyang Shang had already entered the safe zone. Wang Lu descended from the sky with a satisfied smile. Ouyang Shang also had a smile on his face, but there was a hint of seriousness in his smile. This flood dragon of blessed fountain is stronger than expected. 30 years ago, when the sect's elders passed by, it could only rely on the momentum of the mountains and rivers. But now it can link up with the power of heaven. Moreover, the pool is not filled with shrimp soldiers and crab generals, but rather the descendants of the flood dragon. The number is small, but the comprehensive strength is much stronger. Ouyang Shang's eyesight was very sharp. When the water level of blessed fountain rose, He only took a glance and basically understood the outline of the flood dragon's strength. However, after seeing it clearly, he was instead shocked. It seems that the plan to choose the location of Blessed Fountain needs to be adjusted. Ouyang Shang nodded and then suddenly changed the topic. Speaking of which, junior brother Wang Lu, there is something that I have always wanted to ask, but now I have to say it. You. Who exactly are you? Ouyang Shang looked at Wang Lu. His eyes were burning, but not sharp and threatening. Instead, they were full of sincerity, like a young girl yearning for love. Wang Lu smiled. Didn't you say that I am the illegitimate child of the sect leader? That's impossible. Ouyang Shang resolutely said. A mere illegitimate child of the sect leader, it is impossible to easily block the poisonous water array of the Blessed Fountain. That water contains the essence of the 1,000-year-old flood dragon, which is very corrosive. Even if I resist it, it would be a bit difficult. But not only did you block it, you also seem to be doing it with ease. Wang Lu shrugged his shoulders. About this, although I am embarrassed to say it, but your strength seems to be above me. Ouyang Shang said. But because of this, I am sure that you are not the illegitimate child of the sect leader. What is the relationship between these two things? Ouyang Shang said. Because I am the illegitimate child of the sect leader. F***CK. Chapter 483. Wang Lu found that since the Spirit Sword Heavenly Talisman failed to transfer time and space, which involved him in this time travel drama, his worldview had been repeatedly hit. It could make Wang Lu himself, the worldview destroyer, feel shaken, which showed how terrifying the script of this drama was. However, as one of the leading actors, Ouyang Shang seemed very calm. I am the illegitimate child of the sect leader, so I am very clear about how much resources the sect can invest and how much effect I can achieve as an illegitimate child. I also know the potential limit of this bloodline. To put it bluntly, my strength basically means a limit, but you have surpassed this limit. Although the range is not too big, it is undoubtedly beyond doubt. Ouyang Shang said, of course, there are no absolutes in this world. Perhaps you had some fortuitous encounters on the path of cultivation. Perhaps you have some fortuitous encounter on the road of immortal cultivation, but since your talent and strength are above me, then there is no reason for the sect leader not to choose you as the big brother of the sect, which is also the future leader of the sect. Wang Lu said with a smile, perhaps he just doesn't like meme. If you know him, you should know that he has never been a person who pays attention to personal feelings. He has long given everything to the sect. Even his former lover can be abandoned like a pair of worn-out shoes. He chose me not because I am his son, but because I am better than anyone else. Wang Lu smiled bitterly. He was indeed not familiar with the sect leader of this generation. Because the sect leader he was familiar with was called Feng Yin, who in this era should still be a young man with shoot-on-stage cultivation base. In short, at first, I really thought that you are the illegitimate child of the sect leader, because only that explanation seemed to be the most reasonable. But now it seems that I have guessed wrong, so I want to know, who exactly are you? Wang Lu thought about it and felt that with Ouyang Shang's temperament, the most appropriate answer should be it. If I say that I am a time traveler, what would you think? Upon hearing this, Ouyang Shang was startled. After thinking for a moment, he smiled and said, Welcome to 9 regions. Then his smile faded. May I ask what are you doing here? His reaction was not bad. He was indeed the big brother of Spirit Sword sect. The thickness of his nerves had reached the standard. I'm here to save you, Wang Lu said frankly. Or rather, I'm here to save all of you. Ouyang Shang's eyes widened. Are you here to save all of us? This kind of speech reminds me of some cult teachings that are popular in some remote and backward places. You have a good eye. Before I transmigrated, I did hold the position of a cult leader. Even with Ouyang Shang's eloquence at this moment, he also felt somewhat speechless. Fortunately, Wang Lu didn't wait for him to continue. Even so, I wasn't joking when I said I'm here to save people. Wang Lu thought that since his identity as a transmigrator had been revealed, there was no need to hide the rest of the matter, so he summarized it concisely. I come from 150 years in the future, and I was the lead disciple of Spirit Sword sect at that time. And according to the history I know, your group was almost wiped out in the Savage Land. Really? Ouyang Shang's tone was relatively flat. He didn't directly rebuke him, nor did he fall into fear. Wiped out. So, the reason you transmigrated this time is to save us? Although the cause and effect relationship is somewhat reversed, at present, it's more or less the same. If that's the case, then I thank you on behalf of my junior brothers and sisters. Ouyang Shang nodded his head. But you don't have to say the next words. Wang Lu froze for a moment. I wanted to be polite, but since you said no, then forgive me for going straight to the point. Actually, I've wanted to say this for a long time. Your management training program is simply seeking death. I think it's better to withdraw it as soon as possible. Ouyang Shang also froze for a moment. When I said you don't have to say the next words, I was referring to this. Wang Lu froze again. This, Uncle Ouyang. You don't have to call me uncle. You've transmigrated here, so we can talk as equals. Okay, senior brother Ouyang, as far as I know, the cause of your death is precisely this management training program. Specifically, Ouyang Shang asked with great interest. Specifically, how did we die? Wang Lu shrugged his shoulders. I don't know, the survivors have never mentioned it to me. Then how are you so sure that the culprit is the management training program? Deduced from the clues, among many possibilities, this is the most likely. Wang Lu confidently took his reasoning as the truth. I see. Ouyang Shang did not refute. Then have you ever considered, even if I can accept your explanation, can Lingjian school? Probably not. That's why I specifically accompanied you for a day. Wang Lu was also very calm. It doesn't matter if others don't believe it, as long as you believe it. Hearing this, Ouyang Shang smiled. As expected of the future chief disciple of Lingjian school. Talent, strength and scheming are all at such a level. Why should Lingjian school worry about not being able to revive? Seeing you, I feel that even if all of us die, it doesn't matter. I think it does matter a bit. Ouyang Shang laughed even louder. I just meant it. In this era, I am like a star in the sky, and one day, I will become a blazing sun. How could I die so easily? That would be the loss of the entire 9 regions. Your shameless face actually has a bit of my charm. Wang Lu smiled. Speaking of which, although I don't know the details of what happened that year, but, Ouyang Shang waved his hand again. Forget it. I'm not interested in the experience of the loser. Since you were born in the history of my failure, there's no need to tell me what I'm like as a loser. It's uncomfortable to hear it. After a pause, Ouyang Shang said, in any case, since this management training program can get such a strong aid like you, I think even if there was such a fatal crisis before, when the time comes, we can turn misfortune into fortune. At least for now, we can work in that direction. Wang Lu nodded. This is also one of the purposes of me following you all the way. After all, he didn't know the whole picture of what happened more than 100 years ago, so Wang Lu couldn't determine which link went wrong that led to such a tragedy in Spirit Sword Mountain. And in the case where everything was still unknown, rash action was likely to have the opposite effect. For example, the worst-case scenario was that the cause of the destruction of the Golden Generation was an opponent that they simply couldn't match. In those days, the Lingjian school survived by cutting off one's wrist. If they listened to Wang Lu's suggestion at this time and everyone holed up in seclusion, the result would be that they didn't even have the chance to cut off one's wrist. In the real sense, they would be completely wiped out. The possibility of this guess was not great, but who dared to bet? Therefore, compared to rash action, Wang Lu would rather go steady and personally follow the Golden Generation to reclaim the Savage Land. By then, no matter what situation they encountered, there would always be room for mediation. He was not too worried that he would be buried along with them. After all, there were survivors in the Golden Generation. Since Feng Yin and Wang Wu could survive, of course, he could too. Let's push this trainee plan to completion together. For Wang Lu, compared to simply using his time travel advantage to save people, wouldn't it be better if he could complete the management training of that year? With the promise of Wang Lu, Ouyang Shang seemed very happy. Wang Lu, on the other hand, was very calm. Then, next, Ouyang Shang said, next, according to what I said, we should first adjust the strategic policy of the location of Blessed Fountain. The strength of the Flood Dragon is beyond expectation, so we... Half a day later, Wang Lu saw the result of Ouyang Shang's adjustment. This big brother of Spirit Sword sect did have an unexpected specialty. Wang Lu thought that after seeing the power of the Flood Dragon, he would choose to return to Jadeite Forest, but the result was, ha ha ha, big brother, I can't believe we meet again after only 3 days. Could it be that you've encountered a problem that you need the help of us junior brothers and sisters? In mid-air, a hearty laughter came. In his field of vision, a group of cultivators wearing spirit sword sex robes flew over. The leader was a big man with a curly beard. He was strong and had a loud and clear voice, with messy short hair, a loose gray robe, and 2 wine gourds on his waist. His unruly temperament assaulted one's face. However, if one looked carefully at his facial features, one could find that he was actually not that old. Especially his quick-witted eyes, which showed a bit of immaturity. However, to be able to become the leader of the elite team, this curly-beard man obviously had his own uniqueness. Even Ouyang Shang looked at him differently. Junior brother Yang, this time, I'm not asking you for help, but to give you an opportunity. While the two of them were talking, the group led by the curly-beard man, Yang Fei, had already landed at the top of the mountain. What opportunity? Yang Fei was impatient. After landing, he couldn't wait to ask, did you catch a beautiful seductress? There's a big guy. Ouyang Shang pointed his finger at the location of Blessed Fountain. I plan to let everyone share it. In addition to you, I also called junior brother Zhou Ming and junior brother Han Churan. Oh, that's 4 groups of people. What kind of big guy is worth so many people? For groups of people are scattered in different places, so the time spent on the round-trip is already a lot. Yang Fei's words actually showed the quality of his coarse words. Ouyang Shang lightly smiled. You'll know when you see it. Seeing that his senior brother intended to keep it a secret, Yang Fei didn't care about it. In any case, he had been with his big brother for so many years. When did he ever let him down? It was just that. Then Yang Fei couldn't help but raise his eyebrows as a new question came to him. Who is that guy? He looks unfamiliar. He pointed his finger at Wang Lu, who was chatting with the young cultivators of spirit sword sect that he brought with him. The corner of Ouyang Shang's mouth curled up. He's the byproduct of that old thing sect leader enjoying life. Oh! Yang Fei was somewhat in disbelief, but soon convinced himself. No wonder he looks a bit like you've. Chapter 484. The rumor that Wang Lu was the illegitimate child of the sect leader was soon widely spread and recognized. Among them, the big brother Ouyang Shang's deliberate promotion was the most important. He enjoyed a high prestige within the sect, and his words could be said to be final on important matters. Secondly, although the illegitimate child conjecture was absurd, upon careful thought, it seemed to perfectly explain the sudden appearance of Wang Lu, so it quickly took root in people's hearts. As for Wang Lu himself, he was also happy to see it. Otherwise, why would he expose his identity as a time traveler to everyone? Among these people, he only trusted Ouyang Shang. However, compared to the topic of illegitimate child, what was really worth paying attention to was Ouyang Shang's boldness and radicalism. In order to deal with the flood dragon of Blessed Fountain, he actually directly summoned 4 teams of people and prepared for a long and team fight. According to his theory, since the flood dragon was far from what their team could contend against, then they should just find a few more teams. If it was still not enough, then they could find more teams. With more than 100 people to manage and train, they would definitely be able to kill the flood dragon. In short, words like retreat and giving up never appeared in his consideration. In this regard, Wang Lu was non-committal. Although Ouyang Shang's strategy was radical, it was not necessarily more dangerous than when he challenged the Holy One with his peak shoot-on stage strength in the Western continent. Not to mention that thanks to him summoning 4 teams of people, Wang Lu finally saw a few familiar faces. Ha ha ha, junior brother Zhou Ming, you're the latest, so you should drink 3 cups of wine as punishment. I think the immortal jade drink that you've been collecting for many years is not bad. Punish your sister. You made me come all the way from the swamp in one breath, yet you still want to covet my wine? Zhou Ming unceremoniously swatted away Ouyang Shang's hand that was reaching for his mustard seed bag with his scabbard. Seeing this future 4th elder of Spirit Sword sect, Wang Lu couldn't help but smile. Previously, when he inquired about the news in the Spirit Sword sect, the 10 elders of Heavenly Sword Hall were almost all losers in the Golden Age, and only a few of them were ranked high. Now, it seemed like Uncle Zhou Ming was one of them. However, among the hundreds of people of the Golden Generation, he had already seen 1/3 of them, so how could there only be 2 familiar faces? One was Lu Li, And one was Zhou Ming. What about the others? Where was sect leader Feng Yin? This was especially so for the person he missed the most. It was truly regretful that he couldn't see her. However, Wang Lu's attention quickly shifted elsewhere. Among the 4 teams gathered at the top of the mountain, the ratio of men and women was basically balanced. There were slightly more girls, and the average quality of the nearly 20 girls made Wang Lu quite impressed. He didn't expect Lingjian School to produce beauties in the past, and the quality of the beauties was not inferior to professional organizations like Yin Yang sect. One had to know that the pursuit of beauty by cultivators and mortals was on a completely different level. Because even foundation establishment cultivators, and even some qi condensation cultivators could use unique techniques to change the shape of their fleshly bodies. At that time, a beautiful face and a sexy figure would be at his fingertips. In such a big environment, the cultivators naturally had a higher demand. Details. For example, skin. It sounded simple to say that it was as smooth as jade, but was it really smooth and flawless, or was it just that the body hair was relatively thin? It was also clean, but there were differences in the glossiness of the skin, and there were also great differences in the fine lines. These differences might be insignificant to the mortal world, or even undetectable, but at the level of cultivators, they were more and more important, because their pursuit of beauty had already reached the microscopic level. And the requirement of microscopic level posed a challenge to the cultivators' beauty maintenance. Especially the higher the level of the cultivators, the more stringent and difficult to satisfy the requirements of the details. For example, in terms of figure, generally speaking, if a woman had a 34D cup, it was enough to be proud, but in the eyes of some cultivators, this number was simply too rough to look straight at. There was number 34. With a chest circumference of 1415926, how could she have the nerve to come out and meet people? And to maintain the chest circumference to such precision and stability for a long time? Ordinary cultivators really couldn't do it. If you want to be beautiful, you have to work hard. This was almost universal for both men and women. The natural beauty of the mortal world was basically not enough at the microscopic level. Attention must be paid to adjusting the fleshly body, and the knowledge was hard to explain in a few words. Moreover, in addition to external beauty, cultivators also emphasized temperament. If the temperament was not good, like a certain person, no matter how perfect her appearance was, points would still be deducted. And in Wang Lu's view, this generation of female disciples of Lingjian School could be called the best beauties in the same realm. Perhaps there was still a gap between them and the super beauties like Xiao Liuli, but it was enough to make the girls of the Yin Yang sect pale in comparison. And thinking that this group of girls would eventually be annihilated, Wang Lu felt even more bitter. Those who died were all girls, and they were all delicate and lovely girls. If only the ones who died were those who had no integrity like Wang Wu, how good would it be? With this thought in mind, Wang Lu chatted and laughed with the girls to his heart's content. Because of the eldest senior brother's guarantee, the girls didn't guard against him and quickly got along with him. At the same time, he also noticed that there was a figure in the crowd that seemed to be quite unique. It was a girl with an ordinary appearance and temperament. From a mortal's point of view, this girl could be called beautiful. Her delicate small face and thin but curvaceous body were enough to make many men who had been single for decades go crazy. However, at this time, under the contrast of so many beautiful girls of Spirit Sword sect, this girl suddenly seemed dull. It could be seen that she didn't care about her appearance at all. She was completely unwilling to spend a little bit of effort to decorate herself. So many details seemed very rough. At the same time, her temperament was stiff, which formed a sharp contrast with the lively and lovely girls around her. Moreover, she was indeed out of tune with her surroundings. Right now, the 4 teams of cultivators had gathered together under the summons of Ouyang Shang. Everyone was talking and laughing, sharing what they had seen and heard in the past few days. Only she stood alone in the corner, not saying a word. Because she was unique, she attracted the interest of Wang Lu. "Hey, hello." With a hint of a gentle smile, Wang Lu ran to greet the ordinary-looking girl. However, the other party didn't have the slightest reaction. Even her half-opened eyes didn't move. It wasn't until Wang Lu called her again that she suddenly woke up and opened her eyes wide. "What? What do you want?" The girl's voice seemed to be somewhat lacking in energy, intermittent. However, Wang Lu was keenly aware that this was because she had diverted most of her energy to other places. Her energy for conversation was seriously insufficient. While she was speaking, she would be absent-minded. And the thing that she was distracted with was cultivation. When he got close to the girl, he could clearly feel that the surrounding spiritual energy was slowly but firmly rotating around her. The girl tried to use her primordial spirit to construct an energy cycle. This was a very orthodox cultivation method. It was so orthodox that it seemed strange in this place where geniuses gathered. Because it was too orthodox, the efficiency was not high. Unless it was accumulated over a long period of time, without a moment's rest, only then could there be some achievements. However, the test of perseverance and endurance of the cultivator was too harsh. Generally, only those who were forced to do closed-door training would cultivate in this way. Is this performance art? Wang Lu stepped forward and asked. The girl glanced at him, then closed her eyes and continued to focus on constructing her own energy cycle, no longer paying attention to this inexplicable question. Wang Lu smiled and did not disturb her. Instead, he turned his head and walked over to ask Ouyang Shang. That girl over there, what's going on? Ouyang Shang glanced at her and sighed. She has always been one of the most hard-working people in the sect. Unfortunately, her talent is limited, and she has never been able to achieve high enough achievements. If her talent is so poor, it's better to expel her from the golden generation. Why bring her here and take risks? Poor talent. Ouyang Shang sighed again. The so-called talent, in essence, is nothing more than the progress of cultivation divided by the time of cultivation. And her results are not worse than others. Cultivating for 20 years to reach the Shudan stage, in other sects, she can be called a genius, right? Wang Lu, of course, agreed with this theory. With his experience and knowledge, he naturally would not be as narrow-minded as some people, who only judged heroes based on their spirit root aptitude. If he really counted it that way, then his void spirit root was actually a standard waste spirit root when he entered the sect. There were many factors that determined the achievements of a cultivator, such as the nature of the spirit root, talent, wisdom, perseverance, and luck. If a cultivator with poor aptitude could obtain an immortal inheritance every time he jumped off a cliff, and after 10 jumps, he could ascend to the immortal world, would you say that he was not a genius? Therefore, it was meaningless to care about a single factor. The most objective way was, as Ouyang Shang said, to divide the progress of cultivation by the time of cultivation, and since that ordinary girl's results were not bad, in fact, I have always been very optimistic about her. Ouyang Shang said, although most people in the sect do not agree with my point of view, I have always believed that as long as the nature of the spirit root is above a certain foundation, then what determines a cultivator's achievements is often his character. And with Wang Wu's character, she can undoubtedly achieve great things. Yes. Wait, what did you say her name was? Ouyang Shang was somewhat surprised by Wang Lu's fuss. Wang Wu, this name is nothing special, right? Or does she have some connection with you, a time traveler, in the future? F***ck, the connection is too big. But at this time, Wang Lu already had no time to explain anything to Ouyang Shang. When he learned that this beautiful but coarse girl was his future Shizhuan, Wang Lu really had a feeling that his 3 views, and 3 views were once again collapsing. In terms of appearance, there were indeed some similarities between the two, but because the difference in temperament and demeanor was too big, it was impossible to think that they were the same. In fact, no matter how you looked at it, it was difficult to see that this indifferent and introverted girl would be the future Wang Wu who had lost all her moral integrity. Wang Lu was stunned for a moment, and then thought again. As the saying goes, you can't judge a book by its cover. Perhaps at this time, Wang Wu was only using diligent cultivation to cover up her unruly heart. Let me carefully investigate. So he shook off Ouyang Shang, and once again came in front of Wang Wu. In the future, the tall and slender Shizhuan, who was almost not inferior to his Shizhuan, was now just a slightly childish young girl, shorter than Wang Lu by more than half a head. When Wang Lu walked forward, his whole body was covered in shadows. Then Wang Lu lowered his head and seriously asked, "Do you want to date?" Chapter 485. Perhaps it was because Wang Lu was too close that the energy circulation had been disturbed. Wang Wu opened her eyes and looked at Wang Lu with some bewilderment. Wang Lu repeated, "Do you want to make an appointment?" Wang Wu slightly frowned, seemingly not understanding what he was talking about. Wang Lu secretly sneered, "Pretend. I'll let you pretend." Then he briefly explained, "Do you want to have a one-night stand?" One-night stand? The girl raised her head. Her eyes looked very blank. A moment later, a blush gradually appeared on her cheeks, and her head that had just been raised immediately drooped down. Wang Lu simply wanted to applaud this exquisite performance. Damn it, I can't believe you were so good at acting when you were young. What an innocent girl's face. It actually has a blushing function. TSK, just hearing a one-night stand and you blush. Is this something you can do? Your original body is that lust maniac who didn't hesitate to drag his apprentice to bed in order to divide the property. However, before Wang Lu could speak, his shoulder was suddenly patted. Ouyang Shang stood behind Wang Lu and said with a smile, I'm sorry to disturb you, but it just so happens that they are discussing something important and need your opinion. Wang Lu turned his head and looked at Wang Wu, thinking, in any case, there is still a long way to go. Even if there is a gap of 150 years, this ill-fated relationship between the two of us can't be cleared up, so there is no need to fight for this moment. I am indebted to you for more than 20 years on non-phase peak. Now, I will definitely repay you 100-fold. Now that Ouyang Shang said that there was something important, he would deal with it first. The so-called important matter was still the flood dragon of Blessed Fountain. After the 4 teams gathered, Ouyang Shang finally began to unite everyone to formulate the next battle plan. And the core of the plan was undoubtedly the 1,000-year-old flood dragon with the strength of Yuanying stage. Ouyang Shang's initial plan could be said to be unique. When he pulled Wang Lu over to discuss it, even Wang Lu was slightly surprised. According to the general strategy, when a party was gathered to clear a dungeon with a powerful enemy, it was best to divide the party members into several small groups, each with their own role. For example, those who were good at attacking and had a powerful sword would be the damage output team, those who were good at shielding and defense would be the defense team, and then there would be the support team, the medical team, and so on. When fighting, the shield team would be in front, and the damage output team would be in the back. That was generally how it was. Even if there were a few who made more detailed tactical arrangements, it was just that they came up with more positioning strategies and more flexible and effective use of space. This method of everyone performing their own duties had proven its value many times in history. Some people described it as streamlining the battles of cultivators, and it wasn't bad. However, Ouyang Shang had completely broken this convention and boldly adopted the strategy of individual independence. He didn't divide the 4 teams into groups. Instead, after integrating the 4 teams, he completely disorganized them, and then arranged independent combat tasks for each person. The cultivation base of the 4 teams of cultivators was basically between the peak of the foundation establishment stage and the low-grade king pill stage. If they were to confront the 1,000-year-old flood dragon head-on, it would be difficult for them to survive. However, Ouyang Shang didn't need them to face a complete flood dragon. He divided the 1,000-year-old flood dragon into hundreds of parts from different angles, such as an entity, an incorporeal body, and so on. Then, he assigned a corresponding task to each person. This method of decomposition was quite new to Wang Lu, a cultivator of the later generation. Ouyang Shang's intention was easy to understand: to fully train his junior brothers and sisters, so that each of them could take charge of an area on their own, rather than becoming parts of a large team. The management trainee program was to train hundreds of elites who could take charge of an area on their own, rather than chess pieces who couldn't survive without the team. However, when Wang Lu carefully considered Ouyang Shang's plan, he felt that it was quite difficult. There was naturally a reason why a streamlined battle could be so popular. Ouyang Shang's decomposition method was whimsical, and the problems he needed to face were quite many. For example, the simplest question: if the flood dragon wants to focus on one point, what should it do? So when I decompose the flood dragon, I will fully consider this point. You see, if the flood dragon attacks with its body, then these points will inevitably move first. Ouyang Shang said, gesturing in the air. His fingertips left a thin trace of light, outlining the ferocious face of the flood dragon, and pointed out several joints of its body. Wang Lu glanced at it. Well, these points have been repeatedly assigned by you. According to your plan, if the flood dragon makes a move, there will be 7 to 8 people who will obstruct it at the first moment, making it difficult for it to exert its strength. At the same time, if it uses a spell to attack, then I can also do the same. Ouyang Shang then pointed out more than a dozen points, but they were all incorporeal bodies, which meant that the target was not the flood dragon's body, but the nodes where the spiritual energy and magical power of heaven and earth changed. Wang Lu nodded again. As long as we can grasp the correct position and counter it with a spell, we can also defend against it. Ouyang said, as for the rest of the situation, including the flood dragon summoning its descendants to help in the battle, I have a plan to deal with them, so I won't list them one by one, but, Wang Lu said, but the whole plan is just an armchair strategist. We haven't personally encountered the flood dragon. Last time, we just had a taste of it and didn't force the other side to play their cards. Even the shape of the flood dragon is drawn according to the notes of the sect's ancestor from 30 years ago. As for the speculation about the attack mode of the flood dragon, it's all based on imagination. Even if it's based on imagination, there are many contradictions in your tactical response. Ouyang said with a smile. My ability is limited. These more than 30 people, each of them has to divide dozens of nodes. Under the arrangement and combination, the amount of calculation is simply appalling. Even if I have a certain level of attainment in mathematics, I still can't cope with it. That's because your algorithm is wrong. Royal Soldier Sect has designed a lot of optimization algorithms for this situation. 10,000 Art Sect has also explored the algorithm problem, and there are more optimized solutions. With that, Wang Lu has listed out the relevant algorithms, which made Ouyang fascinated. In fact, when it came to the talent in mathematics, Wang Lu, who was not very keen on mathematics, was certainly not as good as Ouyang. However, the environment and vision of the two were different, which made Wang Lu's mathematical attainment completely ahead of the big brother of Spirit Sword Sect 150 years ago. After all, although Ouyang was strong, under the guidance of Lingjian School, he didn't have many contacts with the disciples of other sections. Therefore, it was even more impossible for him to get the most advanced algorithm from the lead disciples of other sections. With these algorithms provided by junior brother Wang Lu, my plan is really feasible. Ouyang nodded with great satisfaction. Whether it's the actual situation of the flood dragon and the expected error, or any other situation, the solution can be found in the first place with these algorithms. Then, coupled with several actual combat exercises, I believe that in at most half a year, the flood dragon of Blessed Fountain will be executed. Wang Lu looked up and calculated for a moment. Half a year, almost. As long as the Golden Generation really lives up to its reputation. The first actual combat began after half a day. The crisis awareness of this generation of disciples of Lingjian School was very strong. No matter what they did, they seemed to race against time. Although not as exaggerated as Wang Wu, their diligent awareness was much stronger than that of the later generation of Spirit Sword Sect disciples. After the assembly of the day, they took a short rest for the night. The next morning, the battle officially began. It was still Wang Lu and Ouyang who took the lead, followed by the rest of the people. These 30 or so people did not have a fixed formation and position. Everything was improvised, but they looked calm and confident. The battle plan jointly designed by Ouyang and Wang Lu had been distributed to everyone on the first night. Therefore, most of the people didn't sleep that night, but were trying their best to familiarize themselves with the thick stack of plans. After reading the plan, most people were full of confidence in the first day of the battle. The actual situation was indeed as expected. The 1,000 Years Flood Dragon did not personally go to battle. In the face of more than 30 cultivators gathered in the sky above Blessed Fountain, it very cautiously chose to send out cannon fodder to explore the details. Thus, from the depths of Blessed Fountain, hundreds of flying fishes with wings on their backs sprang out, revealing their sharp blade-like teeth. The two fleshy wings were covered by curved bones, and the outer edge of the bones was even sharper than their teeth, looking like two guillotines. The speed of the flying fishes was extremely fast. Almost at the same time when there was a faint movement below the water surface, they broke through the water surface and flew into the crowd. Then they used their guillotines and sharp teeth to cut and crush them. All of this was unexpected. If it was an ordinary cultivator, perhaps this cannonball-like charge would have broken their spirit. However, for the Golden Generation, this was not even qualified as an appetizer. In the battle plan, there was no mention of the existence of the flying fishes. From the beginning to the end, the focus of the plan was only on the flood dragon itself, but there was no need for the guidance of the plan. Each of the 37 cultivators in the air immediately found their own position and used their own means to deal with the crisis. In the team, there were several peak foundation establishment cultivators with the lowest cultivation base, which was somewhat difficult to cope with in a hurry. However, without exception, there were peak shoot-on stage senior brothers and sisters around them to escort them. All of this was neither planned nor rehearsed. It was purely the tacit understanding of the cultivators of Spirit Sword Sect. In the blink of an eye, Hundreds of flying fishes were stirred into a sky full of flesh and blood by various magical abilities. The rainstorm fell into the fountain, and the dark red color was like a blasphemy, which soon completely angered the ancestor of the blessed fountain. The sky began to be overcast, and the clear sky was covered by the dark clouds in just a few breaths. The rumbling sound of rolling thunder made people's heart beat faster. Dragon, the legendary ancient immortal beast, was born to move the clouds and make the rain. And the so-called 1,000 years flood dragon was the intermediate form of the flood dragon into a dragon. To put it more broadly, it could be called a half-step true dragon. Of course, for thousands of years in 9 regions, there were many half-step true dragons, but the number of true dragons could be counted on one's fingers. However, even if it was only a half-step true dragon, the pressure before it made its move was still enough to shake people's heart and spirit. According to the legend, the pressure of a true dragon could instantly kill any powerhouse under the level of King Pill. This 1,000 years flood dragon was far inferior to a true dragon, but when it was angry, the pressure when it gathered into a storm was still suffocating. Ready! With the cold voice of Ouyang Shang, the 37 cultivators simultaneously brandished their flying swords, and for a time, the swords were densely packed. The next moment, feeling the awe-inspiring killing intent of the disciples of Spirit Sword sect, the flood dragon became even angrier. A thunderbolt brewed in the clouds for a moment, and then crashed down. At the same time, the water level of the blessed fountain had already risen to become a lake, and a dark shadow became as thick as ink. The flood dragon was about to make its move. Then, Ouyang Shang issued the second order, go. The 37 cultivators, in a uniform posture, turned around and ran away at lightning speed, scattering like birds and beasts. Chapter 486. Ouyang Shang was a radical but cautious person. Because of his radicalism, he did not hesitate to let his junior brothers and sisters, who were still immature, face the flood dragon that had cultivated for thousands of years. And because of his caution, before the other party's details were clear, he would never really have a fierce fight with it. After killing the cannon fodder that was used to test the water, he would then force the flood dragon to make a move in a tough manner. This was the entire content of the first day of the battle. After forcing out the flood dragon, naturally, there would be cultivators of Spirit Sword sect who were good at observation to carry out a comprehensive observation of it, and then summarize the data, gradually enriching the flood dragon model in the battle plan. And when the completion of the flood dragon model exceeded 70%, they could really fight it. Before that, the task of the cultivators was to use every means to force the flood dragon to reveal more and more details. On the first day of the battle, Ouyang Shang made full use of the flood dragon's vigilance, putting up a stance of more than 30 people fighting it to the death, forcing the flood dragon to come out. However, the subsequent retreat meant that in the future, it would be difficult to lure the flood dragon again. But that was exactly what he wanted, because if the flood dragon didn't make a move, he could only send out shrimp soldiers and crab generals. If he could cut off its wings as much as possible before the decisive battle, turning it into a general without an army, the pressure on everyone in the decisive battle would be reduced a lot. Ouyang Shang's strategy had always been very complete. However, after the first day of the battle, when he summarized the information about the flood dragon, Ouyang Shang gradually frowned. In other words, according to your observation, the strength of this blessed fountain's flood dragon is probably stronger than the previous expectation? Wang Lu sighed. I'm afraid it's much stronger. If I'm not mistaken, this guy's inner core has already been cultivated into a Dragon Ball, and it's not just one. According to legend, in order to transform into a dragon, the inner core of the flood dragon must be cultivated into a Dragon Ball, and when 7 of them were gathered, it could transform into a true dragon. Of course, this process was very difficult. Every time the inner core was transformed into a Dragon Ball, it would trigger a heavenly tribulation. At the same time, after transforming the Dragon Ball, it had to cultivate a new inner core, which was tantamount to a new start, and it needed to face all kinds of difficulties. However, the successful transformation of each Dragon Ball meant that the flood dragon had taken a big step toward a true dragon, and its magical ability had made great progress. This time, it only used its basic magical ability. The real card is still hidden. Moreover, even if it did not use its trump card, with the strength of its second transition physical body, no one would be able to block its charge. Our plans must be adjusted. Greatly adjusted. It is best to give up Blessed Fountain and change to Jadeite Forest. Ouyang Shang clenched his teeth. There's no need, a second-stage flood dragon. According to the algorithm you provided, it's not impossible to defeat. On the contrary, if we can win this battle, our gains will be even greater. Wang Lu said, indeed, a mere second-level flood dragon is not a sure-lose battle. However, it won't be easy to win either. Currently, the average level of the team needs to rise by at least 2 or 3 small levels, approaching a large level. At the very least, there can't be any trash at the peak of the foundation establishment stage in the team. Ouyang Shang said, half a year's time is enough for those 3 people to break through to the Shudan stage. As for the others, advancing 2 or 3 levels is not difficult. However, I have to change my leveling plan. Wang Lu looked down at the thousands of formulas and nodded. Bringing in the latest observed variables, the leveling time has only been extended by 2 months. After 8 months, the team's strength will be enough to defeat the second-level flood dragon. The problem is that during the leveling period, the risks will become difficult to control. Ouyang Shang said, yes, the results of the calculation have broken through the safe zone, and a lot of it. In this way, leveling without any losses can't be achieved, and casualties, I can't accept such casualties. With that, Ouyang Shang reached out and stirred up a few calculation symbols. After several calculations, he pursed his lips and said, according to our current strength, even if we change our tactics, it will be difficult to guarantee the safety of everyone while leveling. Wang Lu thoughtfully touched his chin. He felt that there seemed to be a very convenient solution to this problem, but he couldn't think of it for a while. At this time, Ouyang Shang began to calculate the environmental variables. I just found out that our current assessment of the environmental variables is not accurate enough. Since this 1,000-year-old flood dragon has mutated in the past few decades and produced 2 Dragon Balls, it is likely that the nearby monsters have a similar reaction. We have to spend more time cleaning up the encampment in addition to leveling to ensure safety. The impact on the overall efficiency should be. Hearing this, a light flashed in Wang Lu's mind. In that case, you might as well leave the problem to me. As he said that, he reached out his hand and tapped on one of the arithmetic talismans. The original red calculation result was erased. Forcibly erased? Ouyang Shang curiously asked. In other words, junior brother Wang Lu, you have enough confidence to solve the leveling safety problem? Well, leave it to me. Once there is a situation where the opponent is strong and difficult to resist, I will take action to protect everyone's safety. Of course, it will take some preparation time, so the leveling plan needs to be more stable. Ouyang Shang said, it doesn't matter. Let everyone save some strength and be ready to launch the tortoise shell array at any time. It will only slightly reduce the leveling speed. Wait a minute, we might as well adjust the leveling content and make full use of the extended time. In short, this problem has been solved for the time being. Let's start to discuss the next part. The biggest problem that troubled the team was skipped by Wang Lu in a few words, but Ouyang Shang was not surprised and gave Wang Lu a lot of trust. Next, the two began to really set out to enrich the leveling plan from a rough framework to a complete system. Whether it was Ouyang Shang or Wang Lu, this work would be very difficult to do alone. After all, the terrifying amount of calculation was still too heavy for a cultivator who had just entered the King Pill. Perhaps only Supreme Tian Luan of 10,000 Art Sect had the computing ability to deal with it in an instant. However, when the two of them cooperated, they found that the efficiency of their work had been greatly improved, even more than the sum of the two of them. It was as if they were born with a wonderful tacit understanding. Whenever one of them encountered a difficulty in the calculation process, the other would have a burst of inspiration and report the answer. Both of them had amazing attainments in mathematics, and their thinking complemented each other. After a whole night of calculation, a thick stack of plans was completed. When the light of dawn shone from the horizon to the top of the mountain, the two of them looked at each other and smiled at the same time, and then sighed at the same time. Unfortunately, you are not a girl, otherwise, it would be nice to be your Taoist companion. When the two of them finished speaking in unison, they could not help but be stunned, and then a deep regret welled up in their hearts. After a moment of silence, Ouyang Shang asked, speaking of which, I have recently been designing an immortal method that can change the sex of the body. At present, I have made some initial achievements. Wang Lu, are you interested in trying it? Why don't you try it yourself? The strength of your body is above mine. Obviously, you are more proficient in the field of the body than I am, so you are more suitable as a test subject. Ouyang Shang said confidently. It is precisely because of the high strength that the difficulty of changing the form is greater. And frankly speaking, I am temporarily conflicted about transsexualism. I can occasionally dress as a woman for entertainment, but transsexualism is out of the question. Ouyang Shang said with special regret. Don't you want to think about it more? If the two of us become Taoist companions, it will be quite beneficial for you. At least your seniority will directly rise by one level. And I am the eldest senior brother of the same generation. If you follow me, your status will basically be equal to mine. When you transmigrate back and report my name, it is also very likely that you will directly take up the position of the head of the sect. At the very least, you will be an elder. Wang Lu said tit for tat. If I transmigrate back and people see that I have become a girl, I am afraid that I will not even be able to keep my position as the chief disciple. And the matter of becoming Taoist companions with you has no proof. You can't transmigrate back with me, so how can I win people's trust? Why don't you transform into a girl, and I will bring your falling red handkerchief back to show it to the elders. They will definitely prostrate themselves in admiration, and jointly elect me as the head of the sect. Ouyang Shang sneered. Falling red? What kind of person do you think I am? Even if this generation of Lingjian school keeps a low profile and doesn't communicate much with the outside world, but aren't you looking down on me too much? Wang Lu was dumbfounded. You have actually. Ouyang Shang laughed and said, it's not a big deal, right? Have you forgotten my background? My dad is one of the best people in Lingjian school who knows how to enjoy life. Do you think I don't know how to enjoy life? And we are all adults, this kind of thing is not worth making a fuss about. Or Wang Lu, until now, you still haven't. Wang Lu immediately stopped this topic. Junior sister is here. Ouyang Shang turned his head and looked. Sure enough, someone came over. It was the one in the team that he was most worried about. Wu-er, what's the matter? As soon as her voice fell, before Wang Wu could even react, she saw Wang Lu stagger back several steps, his face turning green and white. Wu-er. Damn it, why do I get goosebumps all over my body when I hear this word? And my muscles are so numb as if they are crippled. Is this some kind of truth spell that contains a terrifying energy? Okay, I'll remember it. When I go back in time, I'll read it to my master and see how she reacts. On the other side, the two people who were talking didn't care about Wang Lu's abnormality. With an indifferent expression, Wang Wu said, I don't quite understand some parts of the cultivation method. I hope senior brother can give me some advice. Then, without waiting for Ouyang Shang to speak, Wang Wu started to talk about the problems in cultivation. Ouyang Shang smiled bitterly. This junior sister had always been cold to him. He didn't know how he had offended her. But since junior sister was asking for help from senior brother, he couldn't just ignore her. Ouyang Shang and Wang Wu's cultivation methods were different, but with the advantage of the realm, he quickly finished answering all the questions for Wang Wu. As the sect's senior brother, he was much more competent than Wang Lu in this regard, sparing no effort in guiding the younger generation. Then, thank you, senior brother. After Wang Wu remembered all the answers, she nodded to Ouyang Shang and turned to leave. She seemed even colder than before. Ouyang Shang was naturally somewhat helpless. But Wang Lu, who had been watching the whole process, discovered a terrifying fact. Wang Wu, who had turned her head, seemed to be slightly red. Chapter 487. Wang Wu's episode did not have much impact on the leveling plan. Wang Lu was a person who could distinguish priorities, so even though there were still thousands of questions he wanted to ask. For example, a young girl like you who was yearning for love, which finger do you usually use to solve your needs? Have you done a good disinfection and safety measures? His favorite fruit was bananas, and his favorite vegetable was cucumbers. However, he endured it and did not delay leveling because of a temporary episode. At present, the most important thing was to improve the strength of the golden generation with all his strength. He must do better than the real history so that, when the catastrophe came, perhaps there would be a different result. Rest assured, with me here, everything will be different. With such awareness, Wang Lu bid farewell to the team at dawn and embarked on the journey alone. Ouyang Shang bid farewell to Wang Lu and also began to carry out his own task. After working hard all night yesterday, a preliminary leveling plan had been completed. Ouyang Shang distributed it to everyone, and then, as expected, he got a sad voice. Big brother, Don't be so exaggerated. Just the table of contents of the combat guide has been divided into such a thick stack, and the text has more than 100,000 words. You two have been discussing it all night. Are you writing a novel? The one who took the lead to complain was Yang Fei, who hated this kind of painstaking work the most. Big brother, you should know that I can't remember such a complicated thing. Ouyang Shang nodded. That's why I found a special tutor for you this time. I guarantee that you will be clear-headed and learn twice the result with half the effort. Yang Fei said, Haha, big brother, don't tease me. Even the reward giver elder said that since I cultivated my primordial Yang true fire, my bad memory and impatience are incurable. Where can you find a special tutor to let me learn twice the result with half the effort? Ouyang Shang didn't say much and just snapped his fingers at a girl behind him. Junior sister, come. Then Kai Xia came over with an annoyed face and complained, Big brother, what's wrong with your brain? Was it a joke to come up with such a ridiculous plan? Apart from you, who else could remember and react in time? When she got closer, Kai Xia found that there was another person standing next to her big brother Ouyang Shang. However, when that person saw her, his face turned red and his neck was thick, as if he had constipation and hemorrhoids. He also deliberately turned his head, unwilling to look at her directly. Kai Xia sneered at this, a stupid face. Then he turned his head and asked Ouyang Shang, Hey, big senior brother, you have to think about it carefully. It's fine if it's me, but there's still Yang Fei, this brain-dead and incurable idiot in the team. With his literacy level, he probably can't even read the battle plan that you've written, let alone understand it thoroughly. When the time comes, he'll definitely be a burden. Ouyang Shang smiled. That's why I asked you to help tutor him this time. Kai Xia still wanted to complain, but when she heard Ouyang Shang's words, she was stunned. What did you say? Ouyang Shang patiently repeated. I mean, you'll tutor Yang Fei. Kai Xia suddenly exclaimed. Are you kidding me? I don't want to get along with this fool. It's contagious. Yang Fei's face was so red that it almost turned purple, and even his eyes began to turn bloodshot. He looked very angry. It's not contagious. Kai Xia continued to protest, Senior brother, please spare me. I can't even learn it myself. How can I tutor others? Especially an idiot. If you want to tutor him, you can tutor him yourself. Aren't you the big brother? You're the best at guiding the younger generation. Ouyang Shang looked up at the sky and felt that if he continued to argue with his junior sister Kai Xia, he would not have enough time, so he lightly interrupted her. This is Big Brother's order. Hey, Big Brother's order again. Do you have to be so arbitrary? Yes. No matter how casual Kai Xia usually got along with Ouyang Shang, when Ouyang Shang seriously used his big brother's privilege, Kai Xia could only comply. Thus, she reluctantly approached Yang Fei and then opened the plan in her hand with flagging interest. She first looked at it and then asked without raising her head, Is there anything you don't understand? If you don't understand, just ask. After not getting any response for a long time, Kai Xia glanced over and saw Yang Fei sitting next to her with a flushed face. He was also holding a plan in his hand, but his attention was not focused. His expression was painful and tangled, and he was also trying to move away at a subtle speed. Damn it, what the hell is wrong with this guy? How did I provoke him? Every time I meet him, he looks like he's a god of plague. Kai Xia hated Yang Fei because of this. Yang Fei's character was straightforward and generous, and his popularity was actually quite good. And the so-called brain-dead and incurable only meant that he couldn't bear to learn those particularly detailed things. Not that he really had a defect in his IQ. But every time she got along with him, he always had a perverted face. How could Kai Xia not be angry? As for now, humph, it's better if he doesn't open his mouth. Anyway, although senior brother arranged for me to tutor him, he didn't say that I must tutor him well. If he refuses to cooperate like this, he can't blame me if he can't learn it in the end. Then Kai Xia no longer paid attention to Yang Fei and looked at the plan by herself, just like most of her companions on the summit at this time. The battle plan jointly designed by Ouyang Shang and Wang Lu was indeed too complicated. Even a cultivator with excellent aptitude would have to carefully memorize and comprehend it in order to have any harvest. However, Kai Xia's perception was not good, so she could only redouble her efforts. After a while, Kai Xia gradually felt her mind calm down, and then she entered the state of forgetting herself and everything else. After an unknown period of time, she recovered from her meditation, stretched out her body, and had a satisfied smile on her face. The effect of the meditation this time was better than expected. She had already mastered 1/10 of the entire plan. Although there were still many difficult areas that she didn't understand, it seemed that she would be able to master the whole plan in 7 or 8 days. It seemed that she wasn't that stupid after all. Kai Xia felt that her progress was good, so she relaxed a little. Especially when she saw that the red-faced man beside her was still thinking hard and puzzled, she couldn't help but feel even more proud. "Hey, do you have a problem or not?" This was a teasing question, but it got a serious answer. "Junior sister Kai Xia, I indeed have something I don't understand." With that, he pointed to a page in the plan. "This change, senior brother marked it as extremely important, but I can't really understand the meaning of it. Junior sister, please give me some advice." These words of Yang Fei were particularly heavy, as if he was reciting his last words. Kai Xia was too lazy to be angry now. She glanced at the plan and was ready to open her mouth to answer. Everyone started from the beginning, and the front part was basically the same. And her progress was, of course, ahead of Yang Fei. The problems he encountered today should have been considered by her sods. Thinking about this, Kai Xia suddenly found that the page Yang Fei was pointing at was particularly strange. She blinked her eyes and once again confirmed that she had never seen that page before. Strange. Could it be that even the common parts, senior brother treated them separately according to each person's characteristics? Do you need to be so detailed, I sage? But after reading for a while, Kai Xia's face suddenly changed. Because she saw the part that Yang Fei had already turned over. It was a full 1/5 of the plan. You've already seen this part? What about the front? Have you mastered it?" Yang Fei turned his head sideways, looking particularly embarrassed. Yes. I've only seen this part. Although I've tried my best, the result is not very good." Kai Xia froze for a long time. "Are you kidding me? The result is not very good? This is close to twice my efficiency, and the result is not very good? You've seen my progress and deliberately pushed me, haven't you?" However, it was at this time that Kai Xia suddenly remembered. Before senior brother Yang Fei cultivated the true Yang fire, he was actually famous for being smart. It was just that after the true Yang fire burned his heart, it was very difficult for him to study at ease, which was why he was regarded as brainless and incurable. And just now, could it be that if it was the normal Yang Fei, his perception was indeed above Kai Xia. But when she thought that the usually stupid Yang Fei was actually above her, Kai Xia felt that it was particularly intolerable. You think about it yourself first. If you really can't think it through, I'll tell you the answer. With that, Kai Xia angrily flipped through her own plan, almost gnashing her teeth as she read, memorized every formula, and constantly deduced it in her mind. This time, she entered the state of forgetting herself and the world, faster than the last time, and her mind became clearer. In the distance, Ouyang Shang, who witnessed all of this, slightly smiled. "It's really good to be young. This group of junior brothers and sisters are really cute." That was all he could do for now. About 3 days later, I will lead the team to enter Blessed Fountain again, and that time, it will be a life and death battle. The second-level Flood Dragon will not let me escape so easily again. In the last fight, not only was I observing the Flood Dragon was also observing these cultivators. The details of me and the others have basically been seen through. According to my own calculation, the next time we fight, even if my junior brothers and sisters are well prepared, the risk index will far exceed the limit value. The Flood Dragon's first all-out attack is bound to be like a storm, and the golden generation who have not experienced the baptism of wind and frost are far from its opponent. At that time, the best result is nothing more than to struggle at death's door with the tortoise-shell array that was specially taught by the sect. But after seeing the Flood Dragon's ability to stir up trouble, Ouyang Shang had no doubt that the other party could completely trap the tortoise-shell array with the tortoise-shell array in an instant. This was an opponent that should not have been touched. The more effort the junior brothers and sisters put in, the greater the gap will be when the desperate situation comes. And at that time, there was only one person who could reverse everything. Until he left, the man who claimed to be a time traveler did not fully reveal his plan. When the second-level Flood Dragon went crazy, how could he turn the tide with his own strength? Ouyang Shang was really curious. Chapter 488. 3 days later, in the sky above Blessed Fountain, more than 30 cultivators of Spirit Sword sect assembled. Before they arrived, their awe-inspiring sword intent had already shrouded the sky, like a solid cage. Led by the top king Pil Ouyangshang, the team of more than 30 elites of Spirit Sword sect did indeed have the ability to seal the sky. The aftermath of the magical power of more than 30 people could make the birds unable to spread their wings and the beasts not dare to roar. However, all of this was meaningless in front of the giant beast in the depths of Blessed Fountain. The condensed sword intent of more than 30 people could turn into a substance that could penetrate gold and stone, but it could not set off a ripple on the fountain. At this moment, the team of Spirit Sword sect seemed to be infinitely awe-inspiring. Once the Flood Dragon revealed his true form, he could single-handedly kill them all. However, they still came. Although 3 days was not enough to fully digest the huge battle plan, and although Ouyangshang did not understand how Wang Lu was going to use the last insurance up until the moment before departure, it seemed that they almost came to throw away their lives. But this was the golden generation of Lingjian school, pursuing the extreme growth under extreme conditions, dreaming of completing the rise of Spirit Sword sect in 1 generation. According to the normal history, they had paid the price for their radicalism. But this time, would the situation be different? The Flood Dragon is really cunning and cautious. Last time, he has already seen through our details. This time, we are even more unreserved. It stands to reason that he clearly has the absolute advantage, but he still refuses to take the initiative to come forward. In mid-air, Ouyangshang somewhat helplessly sighed. He led the team to assemble in the air, hoping to lock the battlefield in the air, in order to avoid the opponent's geographical advantage in the water. Although when the Flood Dragon stirred up the wind and waves, the rainstorm almost ran through the clouds and the ground into a violent river, it was still much better than going deep into Blessed Fountain. However, the Flood Dragon seemed to have seen through their plan, so he stubbornly defended his home. For the cruel Flood Dragon, it was impossible for him to indulge the provocateurs. He was sure that these human cultivators would take the initiative to come to his door, so he just waited for them to exhaust themselves. There's no other way, I'll do it myself. As soon as Ouyangshang's voice fell, his figure disappeared in the air. The next moment, his feet had already stepped on the cobblestones on the shore of Blessed Fountain. The sharp sword in his hand was like a mirror, reflecting the surface of Blessed Fountain, shining brightly. But it was at this moment that the scenery on the shore suddenly changed. The shore under Ouyangshang's feet was like a dry towel that had been soaked in water, suddenly collapsing and softening. The surrounding soil surged up high, as if a giant beast was opening its mouth to devour people. The cultivators flying in the air saw it clearly, and their faces couldn't help but change. Because what Ouyangshang was stepping on wasn't a shore, but a camouflaged aquatic beast. It was a giant octopus the size of a small mountain. What soared into the sky, forming a cage that covered the sky and the sun, was the octopus' thick and powerful tentacles. And it opened its huge mouth right under Ouyangshang's feet, and the strong corrosive digestive fluid surged up like boiling magma. As soon as the octopus appeared, its demonic energy overflowed in all directions, and a gust of chilly wind blew by, not to mention the pressure it suffered in the tentacle cage. This was a powerful monster with a mature inner core comparable to Taoist Master King Pil. Moreover, it deliberately launched a sneak attack. Even Taoist Master King Pil could easily fall into its trap. However, the cultivators of Spirit Sword sect saw this change, but they didn't move. According to the battle plan, in a situation like this, no matter how big the crisis Ouyangshang encountered, they must not rashly support him. Because it was likely that they would fall into the trap of besieging Wei to rescue Zhao and suffer a heavier loss. Moreover, the one who encountered the crisis was not someone else, but Ouyangshang, and he would not die that easily. Sure enough, the next moment the octopus cage closed, a sword light soared into the sky and directly penetrated the ceiling of the cage. The corrosive fluid splashed in all directions, bringing forth a plume of smoke. The octopus suffered a heavy blow and screamed incessantly. It tried to retract its tentacles, trying to trap them inside. However, the next moment, the screams came to an abrupt end, and the cage wrapped by the octopus suddenly expanded and then burst. Inside the cage, a solid hill stood majestically. Ouyangshang stood on the top of the hill, and his feet sunk into the rocks, as if a mountain god had descended. In addition to swordsmanship, Ouyangshang was best at the ground shrinking technique, which was also the earth escape technique. His use of earth element spell could be said to have reached the pinnacle. Using brute force to summon the mountain, he directly burst the king pill-level octopus. In the end, the flood dragon of Blessed Fountain still underestimated Ouyang Shang. His stage was indeed only low-level king pill, but among the king pill-level cultivators in the entire 9 regions, the number of people who could defeat him was no more than 1/10. Of course, no matter how strong the king pill was, it was still just a king pill. Ouyang Shang's sword strike broke the enemy's defense, but he also received the counterforce, which caused his face to change slightly. This change was keenly captured by the observer hidden under the water. The death of its general was no doubt a loss, but the death of the octopus also made it completely put down its vigilance. The strength of the other side's leader was only a. Even killing the octopus in seconds would cause it to be injured, so its strength was nothing to be afraid of. And it seemed that they didn't have more cards in their hand. That being the case, it was his turn to have a good meal. The moment after the octopus was eaten, the sky above Blessed Fountain was covered with dark clouds, lightning flashed, and thunder rumbled. The sword intent blockade formed by more than 30 cultivators suddenly shattered. The water level of Blessed Fountain rose, and in an instant, it submerged the surrounding area of 10 miles, forming an amazing lake. The shadow of a black dragon surged in the lake. Ouyang Shang's complexion changed. He immediately dispersed the rock under his feet and prepared to ride his sword into the sky. However, at this time, a thunderbolt fell from the sky. As a last resort, he once again pulled out his sword and pointed it at the sky. The lightning collapsed, and Ouyang Shang was also pressed down into the water. The part below his knees was immediately submerged. At this time, the clear water of Blessed Fountain was as black as ink and extremely viscous, so Ouyang Shang could not break free. At this time, the cultivators in the sky also began to move and began to rescue him. In the plan, only when Ouyang Shang was besieged by the small fries could they just stand by and watch. If the flood dragon made a move and they still did not help, then it would be considered as deliberate murder. When they made their move, everyone acted in an orderly manner and did not rush forward. With Yang Fei as the leader, the cultivators who were the best at attacking the battlefield immediately launched their strongest attack at several key points of the battlefield. The second-level cultivators, after a short pause, each cast their own spells as the first wave of additional attacks. Whether it was against the dark clouds above their heads, or trying to channel the suddenly rising water, everyone was actually fighting their own battles. Their tasks were different, and they had never had any cooperation drills before. However, in this first actual combat, their cooperation was flawless. The natural tacit understanding of the Golden Generation allowed them to snatch back the initiative in the first moment. Thanks to the help of his junior brothers and sisters, Ouyang Shang broke free from the shackles of the black water of Blessed Fountain and soared into the sky. The thunderbolt that fell on his head was diverted by several junior brothers and sisters who were good at attracting thunder, so that Ouyang Shang could successfully return to the team and was not trapped in the water. Because according to the original plan, no matter what, they could not fight with the flood dragon underwater. If Ouyang Shang was really firmly bound in the water, the others would have to endure it no matter how unwilling they were. Fortunately, things did not develop in the worst direction. However, this time, the flood dragon immediately used a stronger force. The shadow under the water suddenly sprang out of the water and went straight to the cultivators in the sky. It used the power of its main body. In the face of this unusually fierce flood dragon, Ouyang Shang did not hesitate at all. He raised his hand high and clenched his fist, which was one of the pre-agreed secret signals. As he clenched his fist, more than 30 people moved at an astonishing speed. They quickly gathered together, connected their magical power, and with Ouyang Shang as the pivot, they advanced and retreated together. After that, a yellow circular light shield lit up, wrapping everyone inside like an eggshell. This was the strongest life-saving unique skill designed and taught by the elders of the sect before the Golden Generation came out of the mountain, the tortoise shell array. It was a special array that gathered everyone's strength and pushed the defensive power to the extreme. At its peak, more than 100 cultivators of the Golden Generation joined hands to form an array, which could even make a Taoist master of deity stage feel a little tricky. At this time, although the array was not complete, the second-level flood dragon was far inferior to a Taoist master of deity stage. As soon as the tortoise shell array came out, everyone should be in an invincible position. The flood dragon could not leave Blessed Fountain for a long time. Sooner or later, it would withdraw. At that time, The first actual combat would be successfully completed. However, things did not go as smoothly as expected. The black behemoth rushed out of the water, opened its bloody mouth, and its 2 rows of sharp teeth rapidly expanded in front of everyone. And it seemed that it would expand endlessly. Ouyang Shang discovered that they seemed to have misjudged the size of the flood dragon. The previous observations were separated by a layer of blessed fountain water, so they did not really see the whole picture of the flood dragon. This was a supergiant beast whose size could be compared to a mountain. The tortoise-shell array formed by more than 30 people was quite large, but the flood dragon swallowed everyone. It's really an unexpected means. In the dim light, Ouyang Shang helplessly sighed. With the faint light of the tortoise-shell array, they could barely see the surrounding environment. At this time, they were inside the flood dragon's body, surrounded by a black and red meat wall, and the tortoise shell was like an eggshell, soaked in a strong digestive fluid. No one thought that the flood dragon would use such a trick. Senior brother, do you want to open the shield and then destroy the inside? In the team, Kai Xia frowned and suggested. No, that's just seeking death. With the strength of the enemy and us, the tortoise-shell array must not be opened. The inside of the flood dragon is indeed one of its weaknesses, but we don't have enough power to take advantage of this weakness. Ouyang Shang said, pointing to the surrounding digestive fluid, but none of us can deal with it alone. But sooner or later, we will run out of oil. This flood dragon's body is full of miasma and poisonous water. We can't use the surrounding spiritual energy to replenish our magical power. Ouyang Shang helplessly nodded. Continuing to waste time was a dead end. But not wasting time? That would only make them die faster. Or to put it simply, right now, more than 30 of them were finished. It was exactly the same as the calculation before the war. Against the second-level flood dragon, their current level simply could not control the risk, and they could easily be forced into a dead end. Only through actual combat could the strength of the junior brothers and sisters advance by leaps and bounds, and then they could truly compete with this flood dragon. As for now, Ouyang Shang raised his head and could only count on junior brother Wang Lu, who had mysteriously disappeared before the war. However, even if it was him, what could he do in the face of the current situation? Even if his strength was 10 times stronger, it was impossible for him to make the flood dragon spit out the things in its stomach. However, at this time, a huge force suddenly surged inside the flood dragon's body, and the digestive fluid turned into a rolling wave that pushed the tortoise-shell array outward. Ouyang Shang only saw a blur before he was spat out of the flood dragon's body. This sudden change was simply inexplicable. The flood dragon was cruel and greedy by nature. How could it feed back the food it swallowed? The next moment, seeing the anger and panic in the flood dragon's eyes, which were bigger than ordinary courtyards, Ouyang Shang suddenly understood something. Turning his head, on the distant horizon, a black tide swept over. It was a huge coalition army composed of an unknown number of powerful monsters, most of which came from the surrounding vital areas. For example, the human-faced owl beasts of Jadeite Forest, the cursed spirits of Mirror Mound. These monsters should have minded their own business and never interfered with each other, but at this time, they gathered together and aggressively rushed toward the direction of Blessed Fountain. No wonder the flood dragon spat them out. In the face of such an aggressive opponent whose comprehensive strength was far above its own, it might not necessarily win even if it fought with all its strength, so how could it allow the existence of foreign objects in its body? But why did so many monsters suddenly come to find trouble with the flood dragon? Ouyang Shang looked into the distance, searching hard in the black tide, and finally found the answer. An answer that made him suck in a mouthful of cold air. At the forefront of the black tide, Wang Lu stepped on his flying sword and laughed wildly. I am Fire Chariot King. You're tuning in to the Xueqi's Martial Arts Saga YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.